morning. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the final FMDiSC meeting of 2025. I am Elizabeth Swenson, broadcasting from the middle of the Redwood Forest in Boulder Creek, California. I would also like to introduce my shotgun rider, Lynn Allen. Say hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. Lynn will be keeping an eye on the chat window, monitoring for questions. And I would like to start today by welcoming any newcomers. If this is your first time attending an FMDiSC meeting, I invite you to drop us a note in chat. Simply say, "Hi, I'm new here," and a little bit later in the meeting, we'll come around and ask you to take a few seconds by way of introducing yourselves to the group. Some housekeeping. Remember where you parked. The bathroom is down the hall. And please, please mute yourselves unless you are asking a question. You can do that now. All right. Our agenda today, in case you didn't see it in the pre-meeting, got it up on the screen. We've got some really excellent speakers, as well as a couple of audience participation opportunities. The first of those audience participation opportunities is a Mentimeter word cloud. And the question is, what is your favorite FileMaker thing? Yes, I could have asked the question differently. I could have asked, what is your favorite thing about FileMaker? But that one doesn't have the same kind of seasonally appropriate Julie Andrews ring to it. So take a moment at any time during the meeting to visit the poll number 1 link posted in the chat and contribute to the word cloud by entering your favorite FileMaker thing. And a little later, we'll take a look at the word cloud together. Our first speaker today is coming to us from Toronto, Canada, where it was 32 degrees when I checked this morning. Alexis Allen has been presenting her visual prowess with the FileMaker community for at least a decade at FileMaker conferences around the world and from her website, fmdesignuniversity.com. Alexis understands the impact of great design and how to apply it to elevate FileMaker solutions. Say hi to everyone, Alexis.
Hi,
Alex.
everybody.
Hi. Okay, great. So you recently spoke in Antwerp at Engage You, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Excellent. How was that?
It was a very well-run conference. It was a great experience. The Joris and Johan and the whole team did a great job. It was really, really fun. It was a really, really enjoyable conference, I have to say. Yep.
Excellent. All right. So you have some things to share with us today that are going to help us elevate our UIs and our UX. Take it away.
All right. Let me share my screen. And let me just get the keynote here. Where are you? Can you see that? Are you
Yes.
you're
Got
seeing
it.
just the not my notes or anything? Showing the
I'm
correct screen?
seeing 7 ways to build stronger visual hierarchy in your UI.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. So this is a recap of my presentation there, and I wanted to really talk about UI and hierarchy in particular because I think it's something that is really easy enough for people who aren't necessarily designers to understand. And also, when you pay attention to hierarchy, it can really make a huge difference to your solutions overall. So let's get started. So does this look familiar to some people? And just not obviously the specific solution, but the style, right? This is kind of like where we've been at for a while, a little bit. I think we can all agree it's outdated now, that we would probably want to have something a little bit more modern than this. So one thing you can do to improve that is to introduce visual hierarchy. And it's a design principle if you're not sure what that is. It's a design principle that involves arranging the content on the screen so people can really quickly understand, well, what's important here? You know, what action can I take? How do I navigate around, right? And they don't need to stop and think, and they don't need to necessarily read everything on the screen. So when you have a good hierarchy that reduces people's confusion, it speeds up the interactions, it gives them just a better user experience overall. And one thing I hear a lot from people is that they feel like they need to be creative in order to do design. They say, I don't have a designer's eye, I'm not sure what looks good or something like that. But when you're talking about hierarchy, it's really about rules and about following the rules, learning them of what do you need to pay attention to. And so I'm going to talk about those today. So you don't necessarily need to rely on being creative. You're really kind of following those rules. And at the beginning, it might feel a little bit mechanical, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. And I obviously I don't have you, live in front of me, but just think about how this makes you feel, like just from an emotional perspective, just when you look at it, what feeling does it evoke in you? Because the design really is also about feeling, and we kind of forget that sometimes. Okay, so if we look at the next, if I can get the slide to advance. So this is a UI design for a client a little while ago. And see if you have a different feeling to this one. Does this feel better than, I hope it does feel better, but it has a different feeling, just even not even better or worse, but just a different feeling from the one we just saw, right? So when we focus on data and functionality, that's obviously very important. Above all, our systems need to work and they need to do what we set them out to do. But there's also this emotional layer to design, and that directly affects user engagement, affects how good people feel using the solution, and also affects how they feel about you as the developer, right? So the more easy and intuitive it feels, then they also transfer those feelings onto you as well. And it creates a positive emotional resonance. So users feel supported, they feel understood, they feel in control. And in turn, that reduces their frustration. It means they're asking you for fewer support requests, they're complaining less, they need less training. And so it's really a win-win situation. And it impacts you and your ability to support them. And it leads to more positive feedback, basically, when you have a great design with lots of visual hierarchy. So I'm going to just tell you what the 7 ways are, kind of right off the bat, and then we'll go into each one in a little more detail. So the first one is you want to actually just have the idea that there should be a visual hierarchy of some kind. So sometimes we're working and we don't even really think about the fact that we should have a visual hierarchy. So step one is just to know, well, you're going to need to set up a hierarchy of some kind. The second is, what is the information architecture going to be? So this is different from the data architecture. The content, the IA is really how the content is organized so people can find what they need, they can know what to do next, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Then contrast. So this is a really easy way for us to create emphasis, to be able to let people know what's important and what's not. Then grouping, so making sure that we have logical groups of objects that relate together logically, that make sense in the context of this solution, and that people understand what goes together and why. Then leveraging visual weight and size. So having different sizes of objects. Some texts might be larger, or objects even might be larger. Some might be smaller, depending on their importance. Then there's alignment and spacing. So this is also a really good one that's fairly easy to do, I think, in a lot of solutions without changing too much, is making sure that you have, consistent margins all the way around, good alignment in between elements, really sort of, it's a lot about consistency as well, but keeping things lined up so that they look orderly and neat and clear. And then the last way to build stronger visual hierarchy is having consistent patterns. So once you have established all of this, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You just basically take what you have created and then you're applying it to new situations throughout your system, different content, maybe different context, different user, or whatever it is. But you're reusing these elements over and over again so that the user doesn't have to relearn the system every time they get to a new screen. So I created a downloadable for this. It's a PDF. If you're interested, you can go ahead and download that. I can drop the link afterwards. If it's just really on the resources page of my website, that's where this will take you. And then you can scroll down to where this is and download that. And it just has a little reference at the end, the last page, I think, so that if you're interested, we're going to look at some UIs at the end of this presentation, so you can remind yourself of what those are. Okay, so I had a lot of fun doing this presentation, actually. I was originally going to use stock photography, and I thought there's no way I can find stock photography of everything that I want to show. So what I ended up doing was going around to stores, big box stores primarily in my area, and taking photos because a lot of times stores have this figured out. This particular store does not, in my opinion. And it was hard to find bad examples of this, but this is what happened when I walked in. It's called Canadian Tire. They build themselves as Canada's store, and they're a bit of a catch-all. It's kind of a funky store. They have a bit of everything, a bit of outdoors goods, a bit of hardware, a bit of home goods, and stuff like that. But this is what you see when you walk in. So if you've never been here before, you just see a mass of stuff, right? And so how confident would you be that you would be able to find what you're looking for without asking somebody for help? Like you have something in mind that you're going to the store for, and it's somewhere in here. I would say probably not very confident. I probably would either look it up and find the aisle number or wherever the location on the website, or I'd pull somebody aside and say, "Can you just please tell me where to find X?" Right? So compare that with Home Depot. So this signage makes me feel really confident that I'm going to be able to find what I need. They seem to have everything really laid out very, very clearly, right? So the reason I chose this metaphor is really because I think it's very relatable. I talked earlier about how people think, well, I'm not a designer, but the fact is you are exposed to design every day, right? Anything that is not from the natural world was designed in some way by somebody else, right? Whether it was designed well or badly, we don't know, but it was somebody put some thought into creating it. And so what we want to do is really bring that idea to our own work, become more aware of these forces, these design rules that are helping us to understand our environment and picking the best of them and then applying that to our own work. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at a bunch of different signs in different stores, and you'll get a little bit of tour of Canadian retail stores. But I'm sure that these are going to be very relatable, and you'll be able to understand them with no problem. So let's go into each one in detail. Okay, so the first is defining a clear visual hierarchy. So we said that the purpose of the visual hierarchy is to make it easier for the users to understand the UI and achieve their goals. And this first step is really just to have a visual hierarchy, right? So a lot of solutions I see are kind of what we saw at the start. They're kind of no hierarchy at all. Everything's kind of flat. And if you need to understand them, you're going to have to start reading what is on the screen. But if you have a visual hierarchy, when people come to the screen, they're going to see something first instantly. Then they're going to see something that's next that catches their eye. And this isn't random. When people do this well, it's actually really designed. And it's really communication. So you're trying to tell the users what the story is and what the sequence is when they come to your screen. So there's a clear entry point, right? The largest thing is going to attract your attention. And then there's an arrow that says, okay, over there, right? So then you go there. And when you go there, you see there's another sign with a little bit more detail, right? That's what we're talking about when we talk about visual hierarchy. There's that entry point, there's a visual order, and then there's distinct levels inside of it. Now, if you compare that with this is Home Depot and Best Buy, I think. And to be fair, Best Buy, I think, was under construction. So maybe this store was a bit in disarray when I went there. But you can just see the difference between them. One is super clear and very well laid out and labeled. And the other one is kind of like a bit of like, here, go find what you need. When I went to Smart Home, actually, there was no smart home gadgets there. It was like keyboards and Xboxes and things like that, right? So again, when we're talking about feeling, what happens when you click on something that says smart home, you're expecting things to, be smart home and they're not, right? You feel disappointed. So I just want to also remind you throughout this presentation, the design is emotional, right? So it's not just about delivering features and making functionality and making sure that it works. It's about supporting the user, making them feel like it's been taken care of for them and that you're guiding them through the process. So this is my local grocery store. And I'm sure you have them too. There's clear signs in the middle of each aisle, and that lets you know what the contents are, right? So very big number, and then a bunch of little things that are inside of that aisle. So again, this is the visual hierarchy. The number is the biggest thing, and then it was more detail once you get there. So the numbers are important in a lot of these. Not all of them have numbers, but a lot of them do. And that's because when all else fails, you're going to ask somebody, and they're going to guide you to that aisle number. That's what you're going going to be looking for, and then you're going to be looking for the thing, okay, inside of this aisle. Here's another grocery store, similar idea. They have a little more granular way of handling it, where they have aisle signs at each end, and the contents are different. So aisle two, the one end, has a certain list of things, and if you go to the other end, it's a different list of things because that's that end of the aisle. So they chose to be a little more sophisticated about this and really organize things and help you understand through the hierarchy where to find what you're looking for. Then I went to the dollar store, and granted, this is a smaller store, and they have a lot of small items, right? So obviously, it's a dollar store, so they're inventorying many, many, many items, and they're probably changing seasonally. It looked like they had, I think I went there at one point, they were getting ready for Halloween, and then that stuff cleared out, and they're getting ready for Christmas, right? So there's not the same permanence that there is in a grocery store where you can print out a sign and then put it up. There's just so many things. So they're really just giving you one level, just numbers, right? And then they can do that, and they're saying, well, if you don't know where something is, you're just going to ask somebody. They're going to direct you to which aisle it's in. So this is just the basic idea of hierarchy. So here's a demonstration of visual hierarchy at work. So most likely you're going to read the top level information first, then you're going to flip down to second level, then third, and then you go back up to that less important information at the top. So that's how visual hierarchy guides your eye around the screen, and that's to help users quickly understand the layout without having to read every single word, because they'll probably skip over if there's big blocks of text or fields with all kinds of labels and things like that. All right. Number two. So planning your information architecture. Now, I don't know, when I was in Antwerp, about half the people knew, or maybe even more, knew what information architecture is. Maybe you don't, so I'll just briefly just describe it. It's really the underlying organization of the content. And a lot of times, as developers, what we do is we simply follow the data structure, where we figure out what the relationships are in the background. We have our ERD, we have our data architecture, and then we translate that into the UI. However, that's not always what's best for the user, because the user doesn't really care about the information, or sorry, about the structure of the information in the back end. What they care about is they have some goal or task that they're trying to get done, and they're trying to understand, well, what's the path I need to take in order to do this, right? So information architecture is about labeling, categorizing, organizing information across your app so that users can find what they need and understand where are they. And I'll explain why. So we have here in this grocery store organic, lettuce, and herbs. Are these things all equivalent? No, they're not at the same level, right? So organic is an attribute of lettuce or herbs, for example. But they have a section of the store, that's dedicated to organic. Why? Because most likely organic for each of these, big sections is a small little piece. So rather than sending the customers to lettuce and then try to find the organic section within the lettuce, which is probably how it's stored in the back end in the warehousing version of these products, they're saying, well, we're going to take everything, we're going to forget about the information architecture, or sorry, the data architecture. We're going to collapse it all, and we're going to put everything that's organic into one bucket, right? So what you see on the front may be different from what you see on the back. So sometimes you have to create categories that don't really have any meaning outside the meaning of the database. So for example, if I'm looking to get a t-shirt to decorate, for my son's birthday party or something like that, I might be like, oh, I need to go to the craft store and find, the area where they sell t-shirts. Now they have put everything related to drawing on fabric in something called apparel crafts. Now, if I was thinking about buying this t-shirt, I wouldn't be going like, oh, I need to go to the apparel crafts section of Michael's to do this. I'm just looking for specialty tees. But when I see apparel crafts, because it's bigger, it's a bit brighter, it's obviously the header for this information, I understand intuitively, because I'm looking for a t-shirt to draw on, that fits into apparel crafts, right? So IA sometimes means creating something that will logically hold disparate things together in order to make them understandable to the people visiting your app, right? So this is a situation we often have to deal with in FileMaker development, because our customers are not always something that is, super easy to understand. They're asking for custom software because they have a very specific industry that they're in. Nothing else exists. It's very abstract potentially or very complex. So sometimes in doing the information architecture, it's important to think about how these things are organized from the user's perspective. And I'm spending so much time on this because it's a thing that I see quite a bit. And so I think it's important to understand that you have some control over this presentation and don't just blindly follow the back end. Here's another example. So we have British, Caribbean, East Asian, European for some reason, and then rice, right? So these are not all equivalent in terms of the data, but this is how they're presenting them in the store. And actually, just as an aside, the European section was basically Polish pickles and things like that. So I'm not sure why it was so broad, but anyhow, yeah, so they were really saying, well, some people are wanting to look for specific sections, sorry, for specific products that come from somewhere as opposed to a type of product, right? And we're going to give you signage to help you navigate that. Similar to the beer store. So in our beer store, this is the LCBO, which is a government-owned retailer and distributor of alcohol in Ontario, and they have organized all the beer rather than by type. They could have said lager, pilsner, IPA, whatever. I'm not a big beer drinker, but there could be types. But instead they did it by region, right? Where does this beer come from? So there are any given set of data, there are multiple possible ways that you could organize it. And so you're really thinking about not from the back end, but from the user's perspective, what would make sense for them? What are they looking for? And how can I organize this information to help them? And actually, by the way, this was the one place where people asked me, why are you taking pictures of our store? The other places, nobody cared. Also, this is a bit smaller. And when I explained what I was doing, the guy felt very, very suspicious. He was like, who do you work for? And I was like, I work for myself. And then I started explaining visual hierarchy to him, and his eyes kind of glazed over. And he was like, yeah, you're fine. But I did end up buying a bottle of wine just so that I wouldn't be banned from the store forever. Okay, so information architecture could be different perspectives. So you could have broad and shallow. So a large number of categories at the top, but they don't go down very far. Or you could have a broad, narrow and deep structure. So for example, fewer choices. Maybe it's a choice. Maybe it's like selections or something. And then there's not that many at the top, but as you go down, it branches out and gets deeper and deeper and broader sort of as you go down. Okay. So the structure isn't really about the data. It's really about the meaning that users are going to take from it. And you want them to feel confident in that meaning. So contrast. So contrast is a really simple and powerful way to guide people's attention. When we have these visual differences, it communicates logical differences. So if every element looks the same, then users can't actually see the hierarchy, even if you've put it there. If you think back to that first screen I showed you, everything is kind of the same, right? So when you have higher contrast, that increases the visibility of the items that are, have more contrast, and the lack of contrast kind of makes things fade into the background. And this is, again, it's not about decoration or just using contrast for contrast's sake. This is really about assigning meaning. You're not really styling these objects. You're trying to communicate meaning about them. So this is my grocery store again. They've chosen two of the most high contrast colors that you can choose, which are yellow and black. And they've also, just to be, add some interest, not everything is yellow and black. They've used yellow and red, and they've also used red and yellow. And same thing with the black. They've used black on yellow and yellow on black, right? So the large yellow stands out more because there's kind of more of it. And so that's really bringing your eye to that aisle number. And you don't always need this amount of contrast. This is a lot, especially on a piece of software, but it's really makes it hard to miss when you're in the store, to not see the sign. Here's the thrift store. So they're using white letters on a red background. So this is a very common pattern where we see white letters and then a colored background of some kind. As long as it's dark enough that the white doesn't get lost, then there's sufficient contrast there. Here's another one, different hardware store. This is sort of a competitor to Home Depot. It's called Rona, and they use a little more sophistication. So two shades of blue and an icon and some words, right? So the pattern's the same kind of on all of them, and it's white letters and a dark background, very large, so that we can kind of see from a distance where we want to go. And then this is the Shoppers Drug Mart, where it's a grocery store slash pharmacy. And what I see is pharmacy, right? Even though actually I'm standing in the aisle and the aisle signs are closer to me, but because pharmacy is on a dark background, that's what my eye gets drawn to. So that's what contrast does. And this is the last example. I was in the bulk store, and at the time they were gearing up for Halloween. And I looked up and saw these signs, and I thought, oh, wow, this is a great example of lack of contrast, right? It's really hard to read what this says. And then I was walking around the store, and I looked, and from the other side, this is what the signs read. So it's like basically polar opposites. It was just, I thought that, that contrast was really funny. Just being able to sort of see, yeah, really bad contrast on one side, really great contrast on the other. So here's how you can use it. Um, this is like just a simple red, area with white letters on it. So it's similar to our signage, right? And so when we have this strong contrast like this, it turns that hierarchy into clarity. It guides people's eye towards the most important information. And most importantly, it removes the effort that they need into figure out what's important. And when you guide people by helping them understand, then they feel well supported. They trust you more. So now let's talk about grouping. So with grouping, the idea is to place related items together so that they are perceived as a single unit. And that's kind of how our minds work. The closer things are, the more we see them as a group. And when they're unrelated, then we want them to be farther apart. And I see both problems sometimes. I see unrelated things that look like a group, and so it's confusing. And I also see related things that are spread apart, and then that's also confusing. So you want to, part of your information architecture probably will be determining what your groups are and what should go together. And each group should support a specific task or a specific function, and that makes the layout easier. So if I go to the grocery store, I see that they've grouped all of the vegetables together. But I noticed that they didn't just group different kinds of peppers with peppers, but they kind of moved from peppers to root vegetables, and they sort of had this sort of natural progression, right? They didn't just put, they could have put the beets on the other side or whatever, but there's sort of a bit of the way that we think about these are also reflected in the way that it's presented in the store. Even though we don't have like firm and hard categories like this, there's still kind of a logical progression, the way that it's displayed. So here's a different store. If I go to the bakery, I'm not expecting to find meat or fish there, right? So when people are clicking on something on a label of some kind, or they're looking inside of a group, you're setting expectations for them about what is inside that group, right? So if the content doesn't match, then they feel confused or disappointed. That breaks their trust, and that goes back to that design feeling that I was talking about earlier. You're not just putting things on the screen, you're setting expectations, you're allowing people to achieve their goals or be frustrated while achieving them, which is what we don't want. So, Canadian Tire did this again. I sort of, they just have this large area where they have all this stuff, and I was trying to figure out, what do all these things have in common? There's like kindling and then a bunch of air filters. It was really hard to understand why these things were all together. Maybe there was some sort of thinking. When I was in Antwerp, somebody said, "Well, maybe it's just a marketing tactic to get you to pick up something on impulse." That may be true, but that doesn't make me feel good about shopping here. It makes me feel somewhat manipulated, and also it stops me from actually finding the thing that I actually came here for. And then I leave with kind of a bad feeling, right? And we don't want that. So I also took this picture, which was like they had jeans randomly in the store, which I've never seen before, and then they also had ladders. So these are not things that you would know how to find. They're just sort of there. And yes, they're discoverable if you happen to wander past them, but they're not the type of thing that you would necessarily be able to find specifically. And you wouldn't even go to the store for jeans anyway. So it's not a really good strategy if you're trying to make things easy for people to understand and find. Elsewhere in the bulk store, they did do this fairly well. They have these logical grouping from soups and then beans and soups, beans, rice, pastas, and rice, right? So this is sort of roughly how we think of these foods. There's not strict groups for this or rules, but is a kind of logical progression. They didn't put candy where the rice is. They didn't mix something else, spices or something just in the middle, right? They kept it to dry grains of some kind, right, together. So this is the power of grouping. The main thing is when you do grouping really well, you can rely on labeling less. So one of the big struggles I see a lot in FileMaker solutions is that there's a lot of information and people want to show as much as they can, although I sometimes do push back on that because there's only so much information you can take in at one time. So you want to kind of focus on what is the user doing right now. But even so, screen real estate is limited and you need to use it wisely, right? So when you have good grouping, you can kind of take away some of these labels because the grouping provides context for the information and you don't have to label every single thing. So when you have that good grouping, it lets them understand the information at a glance, reinforces to them they're in the right place. Number five is size and weight. So size and weight communicate this emphasis even when you don't have any color, right? A lot of people are nervous about using color. It's easy to do it badly, but even if you don't use color specifically, you can still use size and weight differences in order to communicate the hierarchy. So something that's bigger, it's bolder, it means pay attention to this. Something smaller and lighter means, oh, this is supporting detail. When everything looks equally important, then the users hesitate. But when it's clear, then it allows them to move through the screen much more easily. So you can see it here. They have a very large food and beverages on the wall. And then if you go down, you can just sort of see it on the side here. It says cheese. There's actually water, juice, and pop on the other side. I didn't show that photo, but there's two levels here. But the larger category is bigger, physically larger, and more contrast. And then the secondary category is smaller and a little less contrast. And the vintage store, the thrift store, actually had four categories, which surprised me. I didn't think about this, and I'm not sure why they did it this way. I didn't think about it until after I'd taken the photo. But so they have a large category kids, which makes sense. Then they have girls, which presumably they're into girls and boys. And then they have long sleeve tops and activewear, which are, as you can see, just from the size differences alone, right? You can see that these are at the same category or level. And then inside of activewear, they have short sleeve tops. So you would think long sleeve tops and short sleeve tops would be at the same level, but they're not. So it's a little confusing, possibly for customers, because if you're looking for short sleeve tops, you might not think, well, I have to go to activewear first and then into it. But anyway, somebody made this decision, and they do have four levels. If you see, you can see four distinct levels that are basically, not a lot of color here, just communicated through size. And this is a Rona again. So again, visual size differences between the signs that are on the racks and the signs that are hanging from the ceiling, right? That's different levels of hierarchy. So the size difference is communicating the meaning that these are two different levels of hierarchy. And of course, this particular store had one of the largest numbers compared to the contents that I had seen in any of the stores. They're really leaning heavily on these numbers. Maybe they think that their store is hard to navigate. I'm not sure, but they have really big numbers. And of course, Home Depot takes the cake again. I have to say, they really sort of outdid themselves with this. They have a bunch of different levels, many different sizes. And so you see electrical, then you go to the aisle signs where they have the repetition of the category name and then a bunch of different items inside of it. And then when you go to the actual racks, you see another level of hierarchy with even smaller levels above the place where the product is stored. And they also have icons for each one of these sections. So this is somebody's job, right? Someone at Home Depot is actually figuring out what the category should be, getting somebody to create logos for them, or icons, I should say, and really organizing the whole store in this way. So if you want to leverage visual weight and size, you can just experiment with trying to make certain things bigger, the most important things, right? So remember when we thought back to our first example, we want to make the more important things larger. So it's important not to use visual weight and size to elevate something that is less important. So you have to really think about it from the user's perspective of like, how would they approach this information? And that will let you know what should be larger and what should be less important. And then that helps them to make a decision more easily, potentially, and really sort of spares their energy for when it's important to actually use it rather than just, wasting time reading and spending their energy just reading what's on the screen. All right, let's look at number six, alignment and spacing. So this is something that's overlooked a little bit, I think. Even if your app works perfectly, when you have sort of sloppy alignment and spacing, that can kind of undermine the experience. It feels like things are just sort of randomly placed around the screen or they look messy. I like to think about it kind of like, you're reading a book and then suddenly you see a bunch of spelling errors throughout the book. It kind of undermines what you see as the quality, right? So you don't want the user to question the app's reliability because of spacing. And so you can have this alignment and spacing. And we haven't talked specifically about white space, but white space also helps people stay on task because it organizes the information for them by leaving, this relates to grouping, leaving a little bit more space between things. So I went when I was in Best Buy, I saw this and I thought, okay, this is the perfect setup for me to show you the power of alignment. So I actually went up, a couple of these were messed up to start with, but I messed a whole bunch more up just so that I could take these two sets of photos and look at the screen for a second and you'll see it. Ah, now they are aligned, right? And so this is also a demonstration of how design feels, right? When things are messy and then they suddenly become clean, you actually feel it physically. And so don't forget about that. And I'm getting a little bit of audio from somebody. Um, so then the alignment here, so there's many different ways of doing alignment. So you don't have to just be, well, left align everything or always center align. Like, there's a lot of different flexibility that you have in terms of choosing how you want to align things. That maybe makes it a little bit harder sometimes because there are a lot of possibilities. But I just wanted to show you different ways that alignment was handled in some of these different situations. So this was the grocery store. It was centered. Then there's also two columns here, but they decided to left align them. And then they had a bit of trouble because some of the categories are quite long, so they decided to reduce the space and make them smaller. And they're not all lined up either, which kind of makes you feel kind of a little uncomfortable again. But that's how they chose to do this. Then Staples decided, well, we're gonna solve the too long problem by just having one column and having kind of long signs align everything left, right? And also they have less contrast here and it's smaller, so I feel like it's a little less impactful. But this was the choice that they made, and the advantage here is that uh, categories can be pretty long and they won't run out of space. And then honestly, I could just show you Home Depot for every single one of these. This is a more complex alignment and they didn't always get it right. So the idea is that everything is aligned to the center of the aisle and that the arrows are pointing directly to the category, and then the signs themselves are not just reversible, right? Because on one side they're aligned to the left, on the other side they're aligned to the right. And I noticed that some of them, they didn't put them in correctly. And it's possible these signs are double-sided. I thought it would be a bridge too far to go and like pull out the sign and look at it. I thought that would attract too much attention, so I didn't. But it looks like some people have installed them the backwards. That said, it fails gracefully, right? You'd only notice it because we're really looking at the signage here. If you went to aisle 46 and saw that it wasn't quite aligned to the center, you would still be able to read it. You'd still be able to see it. It's not quite as usable. But so the downside of something like this is it does take a little bit more time, more effort, I guess, to maintain. But the upside is a very clear user experience, more satisfaction, and then to be honest, I prefer going back to this store, right? Because of the design, because I feel like, oh, I'm going to be able to find what I need as opposed to going to Canadian Tire and then searching through the whole thing. The last thing about alignment and spacing I want to say is you don't have to fill up the entire space, right? There's lots of empty space here. Sometimes we feel like we need to, fill every pixel with something. That's not always the case, right? We're creating containers, and then inside these containers, the data can change. It's not always going to be exactly the same size. That's okay. We're trying to find something that will work in all of our cases. And so that sometimes means leaving some empty space around. Like you can see in the orange sections of these signs is there's just the color. There's nothing else. So there's no one size fits all arrangement for alignment. So with you have a lot of flexibility, but that also means you have to pay attention to it as well. But when edges, line up, when the baselines line up, there's even imbalanced margins, a lot of white space, then users feel much more calm. It makes it feel like it was thought through and that it was thought about from the user's perspective, or what makes it easy for me to understand this. And our last point is applying consistent patterns. So once you've established this hierarchy, you want to repeat it, right? You don't need to keep reestablishing hierarchy in every screen. You just need to set up a framework, and then you're going to fill it with your content. So you're not reinventing every single layout every single time. You don't want the users to have to relearn the layout every time. So similar objects are going to look and behave similar ways. So if you have a button style that's an action button, then you're going to use that button style everywhere you need an action button, right? So let's take a look at what they did here. Um, this is the grocery store, and they didn't have particularly stellar signage, in my opinion, but they did use this consistency, right? So every aisle uses the same sign template, and you just look and see what's there. You don't have to relearn it, and they changed the contents. So different photo, different things that are inside the aisles, but the structure is exactly the same. So that's consistency at work. Here, again, we saw this before, the same idea, reuse and repeat. This makes it easy. It's not boring, it's easy. And even Canadian Tire, eventually, if you look around the store enough, you will find some aisle signs. They are not as visible as some of the other ones, but they're there. And even these, they follow the same pattern over and over again, right? That we've seen. And also the dollar store. They were probably overwhelmed by trying to catalog everything in their store. They didn't use a lot of hierarchy, but they did use consistency and they used contrast, right? So they set up these easy to see numbered signs for the aisles, and they're repeating them over and over again so that you know where to look to find your aisle sign number. Okay, so this is what it looks like when we're more consistent, right? We want the same styles, same button treatments, positioning, size, behaviors for elements that are similar. So when navigation, when actions, layouts, they all follow predictable patterns, then users feel more confident and they have to spend less time just figuring things out. And they build speed and trust through repetition. All right, so we're going to look at some actual UIs, but I just want to wrap this part up. So visual hierarchy is not just about the data that's contained inside of your app. It's really about using design to create meaning for people. So if we look at this again, this example, we see that all 7 elements that we've been talking about are present. So there's a strong visual hierarchy, a logical information architecture, there's enough contrast, there's meaningful grouping, there's deliberate size differences, there's clean alignment and spacing, there's reliable patterns. So it's not, oh, I want to use just one of these or all of these. The more you can incorporate this in, the more effective it is. So you can see if you compare these to some of the other ones, this is using all of them together and it's quite effective. All right, so we're going to look at some UIs, but just so you know, it's a bit hard because we don't really know what these products are doing. Like we don't know, we are not users of them. They're just screenshots. So it's we're a little limited in what we can understand just by looking at it, but we're just going to look at the visual part of it. So this is what you're looking for. Does my eye go to the right place in the right order? Can I find what I need and determine the next step? Do key elements stand out clearly? Do things that are related appear related? Do the sizes and weights of the text guide my attention? Do elements align up neatly? Is there consistent spacing? And do similar things look and behave in a similar way? So again, in case you missed the QR code earlier, there's the downloadable, the PDF that has all of this information inside of it and this cheat sheet. But let's go ahead and look at the UIs. Okay, so this is the confident theme that I designed, and it's in FileMaker. It's a theme that I've created and I have for sale on my website. And I noticed after the fact that it happens to be black and orange, which are the colors of Home Depot. That was complete coincidence. I did not plan that. I did this much earlier than I did the this presentation. But and also I'm sorry for presenting something and being like, oh, I'm perfect. This gives me high marks. But I did want to show you something that hit all of these 7 things, and this happens to do that. So visual hierarchy, does my eye go to the right place in the right order? Yes, it does. I have logical information architecture. Well, we don't know a lot about it, but we see there's invoices. I see an invoice number. I see a bunch of items. I see a subtotal and a bunch of totals. Yes, it conforms to what I expect in an invoice. Is there sufficient contrast? Yes, lots and lots of white space here, right? Contrast a dark header, which is letting you know where you are, and then white on a colored white text on a colored background. Meaningful grouping. We just still talked a little bit about that. All of the information for the billing, the items are all together, the totals are all together. Deliberate size differences. Yes, there are a number of styles. Sometimes we're afraid if we're creating too many styles, but you need these styles to communicate different kinds of information in order to differentiate them from one another. So there's a lot of different size differences here. Clean alignment and spacing, something I really took a lot of time with to make sure that it's as consistent as possible, and consistent patterns. So you can't see this because you don't see the other screens, but the other screens look similar to this one as well. It's a similar pattern. Once I have established all these, I'm not going to throw them away and then do something completely different in projects. I'm going to use some of the same elements, but the content will be arranged a bit differently because the content is different. Okay, so now let's look at one that is a little less great. So let's think. Does my eye go to the right place in the right order? Can I easily find what I need? Do key elements stand out clearly? Do related items appear together? Text and size, weights, guide attention, elements align neatly. Do similar things look and behave the same way? So I would say there's not a strong visual hierarchy. Obviously, I can't pull you because directly I won't be able to see, but I'll just go and show you what I think about these. I don't think there's a strong visual hierarchy here at all. The information architecture really can't really tell what this is. I have to kind of hunt around and see and figure out that it's projects. There's not a lot of contrast. So again, something that we suffer from in the FileMaker world fairly frequently, just kind of everything is about the same size and same weight and same importance. The groupings, there are groupings here, right? So I see 4 distinct panels here, and then there's like that part at the top, which is, some buttons. So there's some grouping, but it's not clear to me what these groupings mean. Obviously, if I spent some time learning this, that would become obvious, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what can somebody understand and see right when they come to it. Deliberate size differences, no, everything is pretty much the same size. Is there clean alignment and spacing? I mean, there is some spacing. Not everything is like smushed together, but I would say it's not really being used in an effective way, particularly. And patterns, I don't really see much that's reusable. Maybe the buttons at the top. All right, so this is now, to contrast, the redesigned version of that old UI. Okay, so same product, but now this is the newer version of it. So Does my eye go to the right place in the right order? Well, now my eye goes to DG Enterprises Casino Reno, and I can see that that is a project, and I see sort of project management up at the top. If I kind of am looking around, I see that maybe the third thing that I look at, I probably look at the red bars and then kind of go up and say, oh, it's project management. So I would say it does a good, fairly good job of in visual hierarchy. Now the information architecture is much improved, right? We can see the different sections, and we see a bunch of sort of tombstone information on the left sidebar of what this contract is, who the client is, and so on. And then much more information in the middle with the detail and some statistics. And they also have headers, right, that are telling us what the content is, whereas before we were sort of guessing at what it was. Contrast, I would say it's not bad. Probably could be better. There's, in the center, it's a little bit of same, but it's much better than before for sure. Meaningful grouping, I think this is much better. So like I said before, the labels help a lot, and the grouping of the sidebar versus the center, and then there's subgrouping within that center part into three sort of distinct sections. This is making it a lot easier to understand. And we see deliberate size differences, right? The title or the name of the project is much larger than everything else. Already that is an improvement over the previous version. And we do have this large icon. I'm assuming that other areas maybe have like other icons that let us know it's projects versus it's, I don't know, transactions or time tracking or something else. But I'm seeing a lot more in terms of size differences. Alignment and spacing is a lot better, right? So all the things I just said also apply to alignment and spacing. And then the patterns, I think it's better. There's not a lot here that we can see in terms of patterning. Not a lot is reused, but it's certainly an improvement. And there is some reuse. There's tabs, I think, right under the title that you can go to. They look like they're kind of all the same. There's not a lot of reuse within the screen, but there is an attempt here. All right, so hopefully you're kind of getting the hang of this. I have one more, or actually a couple more examples. So this one here, does my eye go to the right place in the right order? I would say this is an orthodontics app. Sorry, I forgot to say. And I'm not an orthodontist, so I don't really know a lot about it, but just evaluating it from a visual perspective. So, does my eye go to the right place in the right order? I don't know. I see the person's name, and then I'm not sure where to look after that. And then information architecture, and I realize that I'm out of time, so I will just go through these and let you know just so that we don't leave you hanging. Contrast is not great. Grouping is not great. Is actually grouping, there is some grouping, but it's not great. And size differences, alignment, spacing, patterns. I'll just show you one last example real quick, and then I'll leave you some questions. Just contrast with this. So this is also an orthodontics example, but you can see the difference, right? We have now strong visual hierarchy, auto setup right at the top. We know in terms of information architecture, we know what our next step is, move teeth. I don't know what that means, but that's the action that is expected from us here. There's a lot more contrast, right? There's more meaningful grouping. So there's, areas of the screen that relate to different things. Again, I don't really understand the content, but I can still see that this is what's happening and this is the architecture of this particular panel. And then deliberate size differences, alignment and spacing, and patterns. Okay, so that's really it. I think that I'll leave it here. This is just quickly a client solution and then the redesigned version of it here. So this is kind of what we're aiming for. So I hope you enjoyed visual hierarchy, and I hope that you're able to take something here and really apply this. And it's not, it's not special in terms of like hard to understand or anything. This is accessible to you. Really, design is all around you, and you just have to kind of know where to look.
Well, I have a serious problem with this presentation in that now I have to go redesign all my layouts.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah, thanks, Alexis, for a really great presentation and for taking the necessary risks to gather good footage. I hope the wine that you purchased was decent. Um, Thank you also for demystifying the grocery store aisle signs that are different on one end or the other. I never understood that, but now I do. So my grocery shopping experience will be better just because of this presentation.
Awesome. Great.
Um, I want to ask first, before I ask my question, is there anybody else who has questions of Alexis?
Yeah, I do.
Go
Um,
ahead.
Hi, Bob Shockey here. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Bob.
Um, Hi. First of all, excellent presentation. You did a great job on that. It's a difficult subject to explain. I've spoken on it before, so I can speak with authority on that. And I think you did a better job than I ever did. So kudos on that. Um, a couple things to add on to what you're saying. One of the things was when you were talking about grouping, you showed it, like an address cluster, address, name, address, et cetera.
Yep.
And yes, that's an obvious thing because those things fit together. Everybody knows what they're looking at when they see it. You don't need to have field title, any kind of labels on those
Yep.
when you're viewing it. But obviously, when you're entering the information, you do need some kind of labeling. Usually, the inline labels are better to use for something like that. I just wanted to mention that, because I think a lot of people get tripped up on, oh, where the data gets entered is also where it gets viewed, and that's not always
Yes.
the case.
That is a good point. And I actually like to separate those. If you look at the confident theme, that's how that's done. And that's for that reason. So, in my view, entering different information is a completely separate activity from reading the information. And if you
Mm.
think about the way a database is typically used, not always, but typically, you're entering the information once, normally. Maybe you're editing it from time to time, but you're reading it frequently, right?
Yeah.
Most of the work that's done with the data is somebody managing this information, referring to it, doing something with it, right? So to my mind, I like to move away, and I know we used to do this in FileMaker where the form that you browse is also the form where you find and where you enter the data. I prefer to move away from that, which is more of the modern way of doing it, which is you are taken to a screen that is specifically designed to allow you to enter the information. And you're absolutely right. That's where all the labels are. So that's where you know what you're supposed to be putting into what field. And then you collapse that, you save it. You can also, the advantage of that is that you can make it modular. So you can call that script that opens that window from anywhere in your system as long as it has the right parameters to pass to it, right? And you can have a single point of validation. So you can have one validation script that runs when you save that data, make sure that the user entered everything that they need. And then you have as much space as you need to gather that information. You're not constrained by what can fit on the layout. And then when you're displaying it, you can display it in a way that makes sense.
Well said. Well said. One other thing, real briefly, you mentioned when you showed, I think, your first layout example of the ones that you wanted to evaluate. It was the one that you designed. You said lots of white space, and as a good thing. And I see that as a good thing. I like lots of white space. I think there's a lot of reasons to have it. A lot of people are scared of white space. So I'm just here to say, don't be scared of white space. And your clients are scared of white space too. Sometimes they're like, well, what am I paying for here if you're not using all the space, or something dumb like that. And you have to learn how to explain that. But
I
uh,
completely agree. Yes.
yeah.
People do get scared of white space. They feel, I think also there's a pressure because there's a lot of data. So they think, well, if I have more white space, then it's going to take away from me being able to show everything that I want. And there's two parts to that. One is white space is really there to guide attention, right?
Mhm.
The white space gives you a clue about what's important. Well, something that has more white space around it and has like it's by itself in a space, it actually draws more attention to it because that's where your eye goes is to the thing that's inside this field, right? Where everything is the same and is kind of crowded, then your eye doesn't know where to look. And it gets a little bit exhausted from, not having a break in the data. And then the other part of it is that I don't think we should try to show everything in the kitchen sink on every screen. And so you can make your life a little bit easier by really thinking about, well, who is it that's using this screen? What is it that they're doing? And you may end up with more screens, right? You may end up with additional layouts that you might not have planned for, but they're more targeted. And if you use this modular approach, then you can say, well, I'm going to actually have the entry somewhere else. I don't have to worry about making sure that this screen not only services all these users at the same time, make sure that they understand what they're doing, also allows them to enter information, also allows, it's just really hard to do everything in one place, right? So we kind of have to strategize and think about what's important.
Yes. Once again, well said.
Um, I love that you pulled up some of these, what I would call legacy classic themed layouts that were probably built in the late 80s or early 90s. I have several of those. Um, the the I understand what you're saying about design is emotional and that having good design is really a comfort. I wonder, though, how you balance that with some of these older solutions where people have been using them for maybe decades and they're used to the first name field is right there, or the invoice details are down in the lower left corner. How do you balance having changing someone's UI and moving their cheese?
They have to be willing to accept some discomfort. So if you have people who are really resistant, and I have found that some from time to time, then it's difficult, right? I think that you have to have leadership who is there guiding the goals of the project, and the goals of the project presumably are to create a certain experience for the user. And if you want to create a certain experience for the user, then that means you have to make certain design decisions, which may be different from what is the status quo. So not everybody is comfortable with that, and that's totally fine. You have to kind of understand what you're being asked to do and how comfortable are they in terms of accepting the change and how willing are they really, to actually implement those changes. So this company here that I'm showing you was really resistant initially, and then they kind of just saw how much better it felt, in the new design. And these, I'm showing you these because it's the same information ended up on both screens. We did remove a bunch of stuff from the first screen, so that was
Right.
kind of step number one. But you have to have sort of a commitment from somebody guiding the project that this is worth doing, and then people will hopefully eventually adapt. If they don't want to, then you're
Yeah.
probably right. You can't.
All right. We have two other folks with questions. Let's start with Tim Owen and then we'll go to David Knight.
First of all, I'd like to say this is one of the best presentations on visual interface I've ever seen. It's very relevant to me at the moment. I'm trying to do a complete update of a database solution that was developed in 1996 and uses the then best practices of FileMaker 4. And
I've been
the
there.
difficulty is it's a very small company, 5 employees. They're used to using the database hierarchy that's now 30 years old. And how much can you afford to do? If you take as an example the number four group related items together, where it contrasts a traditional name label on the field label on the left and then an editable field on the right, with your green checkmark personal details where you've got the name John Smith. Obviously, you couldn't edit the first and last name fields in that particular screen. You'd have to create a pop-up or some other way of doing it. So as attractive as the differences between the red X and the green check mark, there's only so much you can do with a limited time and budget available for certain projects. So
Well, I
I
would
think.
say I wouldn't say that it takes more time. I think it does is a different model. So it's different. Your time is going to different things. It's a different way for the users to interact, like I was saying before. Yes, if you want to really compress it to that extent, then you're editing somewhere else. And I usually use a card window for that. And again, there's certain advantages, and you talked about time. The time savings there is you can reuse that. So if you're just editing in place, that's the place where you have to edit it. And wherever you edit it, you have to come back here. It's a lot less flexible in terms of like a model to adopt. Whereas if you're editing in a card, you can edit that from anywhere. You have one script that validates, and then it closes down. So if you think about your experience with most commercial software, that's usually how it's done. So there's that. The other thing, what I would say is you have to gauge, how much change will you adopt? How much change? If you can go whole hog, or you can try to, bring these things in as you feel comfortable, and what kind of works for you. I am a big proponent of doing design first. So putting it up in Figma or Balsamic or whatever you have, a napkin, to kind of understand what the appetite is for and how much you are going to be able to do before you actually start developing, so that you don't waste your time building something that isn't going to be used.
Great answer. I was going to ask about that too. We need to move along. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just first and foremost, great presentation, Alexis. Really good at looking how we see these design patterns in our everyday life and how it impacts our design. One of the things we've really gotten away from, and I think it's sort of an infectious thing in the FileMaker community, the use of portals. Portals are by and large noisy. They encourage a lot of scrolling, which is inefficient. It's an inefficient way to access data. So we've really moved towards using badges. Hey, here's a badge that says there's 10 actions and 3 are incomplete. Click on that, take them to a list view where I can filter, sort, search much more efficiently than what you can do within a portal. So we found that we're clearing up our layouts by putting meaningful data, not or meaningful information with badges that incur, hey, behind this is progressively disclosed the data that you need to see here. And the other aspect about that helps is, especially when you're working in mobile and web environments, where you go, you know what, trying to use portals on a phone are just it's a non-starter. So we've really kind of tried to, and it's not that we don't use portals anywhere, but we see a gross overuse of portals in a lot of the design surfaces by legacy FileMaker developers.
Yeah, I agree. It's the difference between providing something generic of like, here's a portal, use it how you want, and here's all the information, figure it out, versus we know what you actually are interested in, right? We're going to make a guess at that, and we're going to give you just that information and give you a way to get somewhere else if you need to drill down.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Thank you again, Alexis. Please feel free to drop a link into the chat for everyone.
I will.
Really grateful for you participating with us today. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look at our Mentimeter poll real quick and see how this is going. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, look at that. Well, we all really like script debugger and community. Okay, well, there's still time to contribute to the poll if you haven't already. Next up, I believe we have Mr. Chris Moyer. Chris, are you here? Are you ready to go?
I am, and I am ready to go. Shall
All
I start?
right, buckle your seatbelts, everyone. Well, he takes us on a wild ride through the latest technology news.
All right, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So this is the December edition of the Tech News Roundup. I got a lot to cover. And for the first one, I'm actually going to need Rick. So Rick, if you're handy, unmute yourself. This was released just this morning. This is the Claris MCP for FileMaker. For those of you not familiar with this, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It's a standard for connecting AI applications with external tools, data, etc. Its value is in reducing development time, reducing complexity, and giving people access to a wider ecosystem of resources. And for those of you interested, you can find collections of MCP servers at sites like mcpservers.org. Rick, are you there?
I am.
Fire away. What do you want to say?
Well, you got a pretty good introduction, and I think you guys have talked about this before. For those of you that are new to MCP, as Chris said, it's a model context protocol. It came out from Anthropic in November of 2024, so it's just a hair over a year old, but it has essentially become the standard that most are adopting. And it's interesting if you think about the things we've done in FileMaker 2024 and 2025 related to AI and LLM. Most of it has been accomplished inside FileMaker, leveraging LLMs, natural language querying, and that sort of thing in that sort of model that we're familiar with. This is the other way around, is using FileMaker as the source of truth and the data and the business logic in there, the MCP server is talking to FileMaker. You don't have to do anything necessarily to your FileMaker solutions, and it will give you the control to say, I want these tables and these scripts to be accessible. You have complete control of what those are. It leverages the security model that we already have. So depending upon the username and passwords and privilege sets, you could control who could see and do what. It's pretty magical. It's been in ETS for several months. We just made it public. And what we're essentially referring to this as is a controlled release. And what we mean by that is we want to get it into your hands as soon as possible. Primarily, we're focusing on FileMaker partners and FileMaker developers. We've communicated through, we have a channel where we can communicate directly with our partners, and we let them know first. And then those developers who are paying attention to the community, that's by any stretch of the imagination is not everyone, but we want to get it in the hands of partners and developers so that can begin to play with it, get their head around it, give us feedback. We will be going out to a much broader sort of general availability launch after the first of the year. We'll do a community live with the product manager who was responsible for this, along with Louis De La Parra, most of you know or have heard of, who is the engineer behind the scenes on this. The post that I made this morning has a link, and you can just go into, you can go into Claris.com and go to under the resources to blogs, and there is a blog there. And then there's pretty good help, and there's a direct link to the help that walks through all the piece parts of this. And then there's a direct link to the Claris hosted MCP server that you can then play with it and configure. So there's that part of it. As far as geographic availability, and because this is part of a controlled release, currently it's coming out of the US West AWS data center. And so the further away you are from that, you're probably going to have performance issues. But our intention as part of the rollout is everywhere we have a FileMaker Cloud AWS data center in the world, we'll also have MCP server there as well. And then this requires the minimum FileMaker Server 22.0.2, or later next week, there's going to be an update to FileMaker Server, which will be 22.0.4. So heads up there. All it requires is that OData and the data API be enabled on the server, and that any account that is going to make a connection, they have both the FM REST and the FM OData extended privilege enabled. And one caveat is, and it may seem a little odd, is that it requires that you be a studio team manager in order to access that. And a lot of you have already played with Studio. It's essentially leveraging Claris ID, but there's some other reasons for that haven't been revealed yet about what the relationship is going to be between MCP servers, yes, plural, and things like Studio as well. So that's it in a nutshell. There is a post on the community that has all those links I just talked about. The blog, I think we'll be updating it because it didn't really have a link to, okay, so where do I go to play to this? It was pointing to the wrong version of help, and it did not talk about the nature of the controlled release. So that blog will be updated, I think, sometime today. But my post already contains all that information. So that's it, Chris.
All right, excellent. Thank you for adding all that color. All right, next up, Google has been on a tear lately. Google Anti-Gravity is a competitor to things like Cursor or Codex or Windsurf or Copilot and VS Code. So Google has moved into that arena. This was just released on 19th of last month. They're also getting into wearables. They have a Galaxy XR headset, so now they're going after Meta's stuff with their Ray-Ban glasses. Those are coming out in 2026. There's a post on Mac Rumors about that if you want to check that out. And as a result of this, OpenAI has panicked a bit. not unlike how Google declared a code red, what, a year or two ago when they got beat to the punch by OpenAI. Sam Altman has expressed some concern with the release of Gemini 3, which uh, jumped to the top of the leaderboards on a bunch of metrics. Um, and interestingly, so that happened on the 1st of December, and then 10 days later, which is yesterday, Chat GPT 5.2 is released. It adds long horizon reasoning, and it sort of changes a little bit about the approach people need to use to work with it effectively. And so, um, ordinarily, if you're doing prompt engineering and iterating, you give a prompt and it comes back in a few seconds with something. Now all of a sudden you can give it a task that might take a half an hour, and so your sort of work pattern in terms of iteration is very different. When something comes back a half hour later, you got to fill up the time in between the prompt and the task delegation to when you get something back on how you do that. So the work pattern will look different. Um, and so the rather than prompt engineering, task delegation becomes sort of the critical skill. And so it's just interesting to see how that happened. But a mere 10 days after the code red, they released something very interesting. What else is going on? GPU depreciation. So, everyone's probably been hearing about these massive data centers that are getting built out for hundreds of millions of dollars. And one aspect of that that hasn't been talked about much is that what's the shelf life of these GPUs? They cost like 50 grand a pop or what have you. And, how long are these going to be economically viable? Is it a year or two or three or five? Probably not 5 years. So, um, just the concept of how quickly these chips can lose economic value and how that would be reflected in the financials of the companies that are standing up these data centers. There's some criticism that companies like NVIDIA and the hyperscalers may be understating the depreciation of these assets using schedules that span 5 or 6 years. And that seems unlikely to have continued economic viability for that long. Um, but the contention is that this would inflate reported profits and obscure the economic reality of hardware wear and obsolescence. So just something to keep an eye on. But what's AI been doing for us? I have a couple of nuggets of stories here about stuff that's come to light. So, um, Hebrew University of Jerusalem. This is kind of wonky, and maybe nobody cares, but it's just something to look at. Check out the URL if you're interested. This concerns the Faraday effect that happens when the polarization of light rotates as it moves through a substance that is placed in a magnetic field. A little esoteric. Scientists largely attribute it to the electric field of light interacting with electric charges inside matter. The new findings show that the magnetic field of light also plays a direct and measurable part in the process through its influence on spins, a contribution that had long been considered negligible. So, very geeky. DeepMind. This is about fluid mechanics. To use fluid mechanic equations, physicists must make assumptions such as constant viscosity or smooth change in pressure. Um, and changing even simple scenarios can lead to blowups where the equations, predict extreme outcomes such as infinite pressure, unbelievable surges in velocity. And those are called singularities. Using machine learning and physics-focused AI models, DeepMind researchers uncovered whole new families of unstable singularities across three distinct fluid dynamics equations. Again, very geeky, kind of interesting though, if you're a science nerd. Shifting gears slightly, this is some malware, Shai-Hulud 2.0, 1,200 organizations compromised. This is a worm, collects sensitive data, credentials from major businesses, government bodies. It's an NPM supply chain attack, very sophisticated software intrusion. Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, they've captured runtime secrets by exploiting continuous deployment pipelines, vulnerabilities in development processes, on and on and on. Related to this, This is a report from Intro Security. Oh, it looks like I have my same notes. But the interesting part was, I thought, was this, where the damage occurred inside the victim environment's developer endpoints, cloud build servers, and self-hosted GitHub runners, um, executing payload scripts during the pre-install phase of compromised NPM packages. I think a lot of people here who do any sort of uh, certainly website development or stuff that uses npm packages are probably potentially should be concerned about this. This is capturing full runtime environments, not just scraping files or capturing credentials or anything like that. So full memory snapshots, crazy stuff. So for those of you who use npm, you should read up on this. Microsoft, there was a Windows shortcut flaw. This was a known flaw. It's been around for a long time. Many state actors have used this. They were inserting malicious commands padded with white space inside the .inc shortcut files. And Microsoft has known about it for a long time. They said this was a low severity problem, didn't meet the bar for servicing, but they finally fixed it. So that's great. So North Korea, Iran, Russia, China have all been using this thing for a long time. It's amazing it took that long to fix. 5G, this is an interesting thing. The FCC has proposed a new rule, WC 22.21, currently pending review. It aims to streamline the deployment of 5G, next generation wireless technology, by preempting local control over antenna placement. So basically, if you're a county or a city and you want to control what goes where, they're going to tell you to pound sand. While framed as necessary for national competitiveness, the proposal has sparked intense debate about the balance between technology project progress and community autonomy. It gets into things like setback requirements, aesthetic standards, public notification, hearing, environmental historical preservation reviews, and on and on and on. But anyway, interesting sort of quashing of local control of infrastructure. Interesting stuff, especially with China being sort of restricting the flow of rare earth materials that are required in a lot of modern electronics. The world's largest lithium deposit is in the US underneath a volcanic crater. The crater spans roughly 28 miles north to south and 22 miles east to west along the Nevada-Oregon line, for those of you interested. About 16 million years ago is when this whole thing was laid down. It's at Thacker Pass, for those of you who know the area. Let's see, Rivian, the electric car maker, are planning to offer iPhone car keys in the Apple Wallet later this month. So, for those of you Rivian owners, FYI. A new drug has been discovered. It can repair DNA and regenerate damaged tissue. This gets into exosomes, for those of you familiar with your genetics homework. Um, they have these coded messages, and it was ambiguous as to which molecules were themselves therapeutic. And the team worked to unpack what was in these healing sacs, SACS, and they sequenced the RNA material, and they have identified a synthetic healer known as TY1. And so I think this is going to be especially important in cardiac um, heart repair damage from like a heart attack and things like that. So keep an eye on that. And then this was an odd one. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Tattoo. So for those of you who are inked, and I know some of you are, um, it affects the lymph nodes and actually alters your body's immune response to vaccination, which I thought was interesting. And so ink accumulated in lymph nodes altered the immune response against two different types of vaccine. On the one hand, the researchers observed a reduced antibody response following vaccination with a messenger RNA respiratory syndrome coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. Um, it was associated with a decreased expression of the spike protein. In contrast, it caused an enhanced response when vaccinated with an influenza vaccine inactivated by UV radiation. And so, kind of odd that just the fact that you got a tattoo will make one type of vaccine less effective and a different type of vaccine more effective. So, the more you know. I think I have more detail here. Tattoo ink reaches and persists. Ink is retained with phagocytic cells, undergoes cell death, inflammation response. And tattoo ink at the injection site also modulated immune responses in a vaccine-specific manner. So just an odd thing. So that is Tech News Roundup for December.
Thank you, Chris. Always very important information. Okay, our next audience participation is a poll. It's a Zoom poll. It's activated now, it's been launched. And this poll is going to help us tee up our final speaker with some information about what you know about OData, what your experience is with OData. So please go ahead and participate in that poll. And now we have the great good fortune of having Eric Matthews here to give us a recap on the recent Full Access conference. So, Eric, the first question I want to ask you is what inspired y'all to take on the very daunting task of putting on a conference? Eric, you're muted, I think. Eric.
Sorry, all the controls move around when you start sharing.
I know.
Let's see. And actually, I lost some other stuff. Well, anyway, that's kind of a John question. Not sure why he wanted. I guess, oh, because I think maybe what prompted that is what was the other unconference that they used to have? The pause on error was not being done that year, and I think John Howell just wanted to step up and give it a shot, and pulled in a lot of people to help with that, and it turned out great. It was a great
All right.
experience.
Tell us about it.
All right, so first of all, in November, DigFM did a long recap of all the recent conferences our attendees attended. Reconnect in Melbourne, Australia, Engage You in Scandinavia, and Full Access in Los Altos, California. We learned a lot from that discussion, but for now, I just want to briefly recap our impressions from Full Access. Let's see, we've got, oops, got to have that there. But anyway, first of all, you can glean just about everything I'm going to tell you from the Full Access 2025 site, and much more is over there. As you might have learned from John Howell and the conference planning team previously, the Full Access 2025 conference venue was at a Jesuit retreat center in Los Altos, California. And when I first heard that, I was thinking, when are they going to be sleeping on straw mattresses and delivering presentations and Gregorian chant? But Los Altos is really close to my hometown and to the original in-person Dig FM meetings that we used to have there in Santa Clara.
I
So
would
couldn't
sign
help.
up for the Gregorian chant thing.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I couldn't help but get involved. By the way, I might have been randomly volunteered even here to give this recap. I didn't even know this. I mean, I found out about me doing this last week. I thought John would be the one, but he's got me on this. So this is going to be partly my perspective. If you happen to attend Full Access, feel free to spam the chat with your perspective of the Full Access conference while I proceed right here. So anyway, the venue was both pleasant and beautiful. It was Los Altos Hills in the fall. It was really nice to be at a FileMaker conference that isn't one of the hottest places on earth during the hottest time of year. I'd argue that the weather was perfect, but way more important than the venue and the weather and anything else is the food. Just kidding. I enjoyed the dining, but better than filling my belly was filling the time getting to know other developers. And maybe that's why they call these kind of conferences unconferences, and why dining at a table with developers was at least as memorable to me as the sessions. Let's see. The people I got to know best were the volunteers while we're running and setting up meeting rooms and running cables up and down the hill, keeping busy with logistics and other conference administrative tasks. And yes, that would be all these guys here. John Howell's in there somewhere, and you might even see me in there. Uh, I'd argue that if you want the ultimate conference experience, find a way to volunteer at a conference. I think it was great, and they distributed the work pretty well there. Um, and arguably even more important than the organizers, I know there's a debate on this, are all these people, the attendees. After all, this whole event and all the work that went into it was so we could see all these FileMaker people in person and all these people having a great time. All that was good, but it's also nice to get validation that you really are at a special event when some of the rock stars of FileMaker show up. Uh, who recognizes that big chia head in the upper left hand? Working really hard there, actually. Yeah, that's yeah, what a gift to our community. That's Richard and Margs Carlton. Uh, they show up to do live broadcasts from Los Altos. And then because of them, the CIO from Clara shows up to connect with the FileMaker developer community and engage in some meaningful dialogue, answering questions, providing valuable insights. Insights so valuable, apparently, that we were asked to delete the recording. So if you want some sort of hint of how valuable that session with Ryan was, later today, Dig FM, I'll be uploading the last night's discussion with Richard Carlton about all that and more. The Claire's platform evangelist also showed up with his twin brother, Rick Kalman. I, I think Claire's engineer extraordinaire, Clay Makel, was the first one from Claire's to sign up to register for the event. Uh, and if you were there and for some reason you hate JSON, you found out you were in good company with Clay, who also revealed exactly when he's going to retire. That was interesting and scary news. Chris Irvine, Vince Manano, Kevin Frank, the Barnum brothers, Jesse and Sam. It was getting close to Halloween, so Sam dressed up as his favorite Claris engineer there. Uh, Not pictured, Michael Wallace, Roger Jacques, David Simpson, Richard DeShong, Todd Willard, Taylor Sharp, Sully, and a bunch of other people who didn't pay me enough to mention their names. If you want to see who those people are, you can still visit the Full Access 2025 site and see all that there. As for the sessions, uh, we had sessions on AI, JSON, JSON custom function, JSON query, virtual list, a lot of JSON, huh? Virtual list, technical debt, new features for FileMaker 2025, WordPress, data API, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we have a full list of all those sessions on the Full Access 2025 site. There was this one session where some wild and crazy guys showed up in hazmat suits. That's a long story. I don't have time to tell right now. But the fact that we hadn't served any alcohol yet should give you some idea how the evenings went. Uh, these guys were jamming. And I had some work I had to do at night, and they were there performing live just for me, apparently. It was great having these guys in the same room while I was taking care of some tedious stuff with FileMaker server that evening. And then there's that's the fact that Sam Barnum up there without his costume, the upper left. John Howell organized the ultimate icebreaker, encouraging people to exercise public speaking skills, giving a 2-minute talk on random junk he'd handed to us right there on the spot. And that was actually a hit. I know you think people were nervous would not like that, but actually we all got into that. It was really fun. This game of Jeopardy was a total fail, partly because my team lost, and yet people were having a lot of fun, laughing with each other, laughing at each other. I can verify that it was really fun and not just virtually fun because I didn't have any drinks that night. I'm afraid if people knew I wasn't drunk, they'd maybe be less forgiving of some of my behavior. Um, there's so much more I could say about the sessions, the people, the connections we all made. Um, but then my name would be John Howell. Oh, hey, but this what our 2025 attendees had to say. We have a bunch of positive reviews about this, but here's Rick Kalman. I'd get him to do it in his own voice, but let's see if I can do it faster. I have attended. This is Rick writing here. I have attended well over 30 FileMaker Claris developer conferences over the past 25 years, and this was one of my most memorable. I got to know developers I have been acquainted with for 25 years better in a few days than in the 25 years I've known them. I expect this was due to a combination of intimate size and of the event and the meeting venue. Kudos to the event organizers. All your hard planning and efforts definitely paid off. So I was going to leave time for other recap comments, but John Howell had some last minute urgent information he wants me to share. The full access FileMaker conference for 2026 is going to be on August 24th through the 27th. That's a Monday through Thursday. It's going to be at Asilomar Conference Grounds in Pacific Grove, California. It's going to be epic. We expect registration to open on Monday. To find out more, just visit the fullaccess.us site. And also for all our viewers today, I'm sharing a discount code for everyone who sees this and registers early. That's that down lower right-hand corner. That's a FA26DIGFM1. I'll paste that into the chat. So anyway.
Yeah, I just want to say I've been to Asilomar and it is gorgeous.
Oh, are you going to be there then?
No, that was long in the past. I may. It's close enough to drive. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd hope to see you there. That'd be. We're trying to get one of the things that I think I want to do is it'd be nice to see a lot of the different user groups involved in helping organize events, maybe getting speakers recorded. Because that's what Dig FM did. Actually, we held 2 meetings there at 2025, and right at the moment, I got 1 recording. I'm going to try to upload that. But yes, it was kind of fun to be able to invite our viewers who couldn't make it to the meeting there at Los Altos. And so it'd be nice to see other people doing the same kind of thing. I think it'd be fun to get all the groups involved, including the people who can't make it directly.
Thanks, Eric. What a great recap. I just have one question.
Yeah.
Did Richard Carlton fly his helicopter to the Jesuit retreat center?
No, apparently that was a no-no.
Okay. Anyway, thank you so much.
It would have been the second coming for the Jesuits there.
Oh my goodness.
I just posted links to the preview of 2026 along with the links to Asilomar and where you can look to register for Full Access 2026.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right, we're going to stop recording now and go into breakout rooms. But first, I just want to remind you to go over to the poll, the Zoom poll, and let us know what your OData experience is. And then we're going to do some breakout. I'm recording. Great. Oakley dokley. So I'm checking the chat and want to see if there's anyone new here. I don't see anybody who posted in the chat, hey, I'm new here. So I'm going to ask, is there anyone here? This is your first FMDiSC meeting. Raise your hand. Like push the button, raise your hand, because we can't all see you. Okay. I don't see any raised hands, so we're all seasoned FMDiSC people. Yay! All right. Do we have any announcements? I think there was one from Alexis. Did you want to start? Go for it.
Sure. I'll keep it short. I'm presenting a conference in Toronto in June 4th and 5th of 2026, and I'm currently looking for speakers. So I would love for people to put in an application if you're interested. Obviously, if you're interested in coming too, or as a attendee, that would be great. But at the moment, we're looking for speakers, and it doesn't have to be anything super fancy or like cutting edge or anything. I'm really looking for quality, like things that can help people make better apps. And so it could be client relations, it could be a technique if you want, or it could be a process that you use, anything that has a really clear benefit for people that would be attending. So please check it out. I'll put the link here to the actual form to fill out. And the website is from last year, so it's not quite updated yet, but please do check it out. And if you follow me on social, on LinkedIn or whatever, I'll be posting regular updates.
Super, thanks. Anyone else have announcements? Okay. Well, I would like to go ahead and take a look at our poll. Let's see if we got that. Let's see, I don't know if I can share this or if you all see it. Looks like we've got 46% of the people here saying that they're new to OData, 39% have played with it, 4% are confident with it, and 11 have deployed it. So about half the people now, it looks like they're new to OData. So I hope that's going to help our next speaker. And I am truly delighted to be introducing him, making his FMDiSC debut. John Renfrew is a seasoned speaker on the FileMaker circuits, including Pause on Error, DevCon, Engage, and Engage U. He studied mathematics and creative arts with an eye toward becoming a kindergarten teacher. But then he ran off with the theater, where he became an accomplished lighting designer and stage manager, which led him into the music biz as a tour manager for such artists as George Michael, the Everly Brothers, Crystal Gayle, Pink Floyd. And it was in Germany on a Mary J. Blige tour bus where he first met FileMaker. So he leaned in and learned the platform and parlayed the skill into a PR position for Jaguar plus Land Rover, where he had the terrible misfortune of being forced to drive fast cars and stay in five-star hotels as part of his job. Yes, we're all very sad. He is now an independent FileMaker consultant in the UK and an OData champion, and I am so privileged to present to all of you my dear friend, John Renfrew. Hello, John.
Hello, good evening. Well, it's good evening for me. This is I'm sitting at home in my having left work, as I appreciate for you. It's all the middle of the day. So, and I've now seen that presentation from Alexis 3 times in the last few weeks, because I was with her in Antwerp, and then she came to our UK version of this online and did the same presentation. So hopefully it's sunk in now, and I now do know something about what she's talking about.
I took plenty of screenshots, so if you just need them, call me.
No, thank you. I know Alexis. I'll just call her. Is a truth.
Thanks,
So
John.
anyway, thank you very much for the invite. I do really appreciate that. It's interesting to turn up at an event where I do know some of the people on the call, but there's a lot of people here I've never met virtually before, and even if they've been at conferences I've been at. So it's nice. It is really nice to meet you. We're going to look at OData. The subject is massive, and therefore it's impossible to cover everything. So I have a very skinny version of what I know I'm going to do, but I have a lot to say. So as Elizabeth said, I'm from the UK. I'm a community MVP, and this is my favourite FileMaker topic. I've been speaking about nothing else for 4 years. But when I do speak, and I asked Elizabeth to do that poll, I found there are a lot of people who are really still just starting their journey with OData or haven't even started it. So the first part, the first little bit of the presentation is, let's go right to the beginning. And this is not a primer on how to use it, but it's just setting the scene for what I think are some important things to understand. The history of OData is that it was invented or created by Microsoft, but it now doesn't sit with them. It's a curated standard. Work started on OData around 2007, and by the time we got to 2016, some of it had been published as an ISO standard. What that means is this is not a new flash in the pan piece of technology. It's been around for a very long time. The what is it question is, it's some kind of cross between SQL and ODBC or the JDBC version of that, but all delivered over the web using REST methods and technologies. Okay, so it's a way to query data, but using the what we now call the internet as its methodology. And to the user, it's completely platform agnostic. That's an important point we'll come back to. But secondly, it's self-declaring. So if I give you my business card, I will give you the means by which you can contact me. That's what that contract is. OData tells you what it's got and what you can do. Here's what I am, here's what I've got, this is the level at which I work, and then this is how this vendor has modified me. Okay. Now then, I wonder if any of you, I'm imagining the answer is no, to be fair, it's one of those fake questions. What these films, what might they have in common? Wide range of films, and the answer is they all contain somewhere in them the line, it's not about you. So the first thing I want to start with is that the point about OData within the Claris ecosphere is not about you as a FileMaker developer. If we look back at, or we look outwards at connecting to other data repositories, and I've put FileMaker in there, we all know what some of those are, but to be able to connect to them, we needed to know a lot of stuff. How to configure what we had to talk to them, we might have to install drivers, we needed to know what ports were in use, we might need to know about the structure on the other side, how to raise a query, what you could and couldn't do. What OData does is remove a lot of that. With OData, that back end is hidden from you. You're talking to essentially a front end that is connected to a back end, but you don't need to care about what the back end is. All you need is a URL and some authentication, and then you can start interacting with the data. So FileMaker absolutely now competes as an equal partner with other things because nobody knows what it is. Let's be honest, it can't quite compete as an equal partner because some of the jinxy things that we might have done with our FileMaker over the years that Claris have let us get away with. But OData is also well in use in many other large spaces. Most of SAP is written on top of version 2 of OData. Everything to do with the Microsoft Graph API is all OData version 3, interacting with SharePoint, with users, with mail. It's all OData if you read the documentation. And lots of other big platforms have OData components to them, either as a client or delivering data. Salesforce, Click, Tableau, WebSphere, and anything that is a web thing that needs some data can use OData as its source. Why? Because all you need is a URL and some authentication. And then a third step, which we're going to talk about in a second. In around 2012, I read this quote and kept it because I think it's really telling. The secret to data in the future will not be with the repositories which contain the data, but the way we transport that data back and forth from applications, online services, and the cloud. 2012, 13 years ago. It's not about where the data is stored, it's about what we do with moving it to where we need it. And OData is a mechanism for doing that. So let's take a sideways step for a moment. and just look at the differences between a language and a dialect. So if you're learning a language, you need to learn the rules of that language, how to construct sentences. You need to know how the grammar works specifically. Does the color come before the thing it's describing or after the thing it's describing? And what are the actual words you need to use, the vocabulary? And to be proficient in a language, you need all of those components. Obviously, we start with où est la gare in French, where is the station? That doesn't make me proficient in French. I can speak some French, to be fair, but that's where you start, but that doesn't make you proficient. A dialect, however, is very different. It's based on a common starting point that modifies between two extremes. So we have Tony vaguely around on this call who's very New York, and we have some people on this call who are very California. And there are differences in the spoken language between you, but they are starting from a common starting point. So an accent is about how you pronounce words. It may contain phrases that are peculiar to you, what you call a particular thing. Some of it may be slang. So how you describe the thing outside your house where you park your car may be different in different regions. But essentially, that's a dialect. You don't need to learn a lot that's new, and it's easy to understand. That's why you're not quite speaking the same language as somebody else, and modify it. In our terms, I absolutely feel that you have to understand that OData is a language, whereas the data API is much more of a dialect. The data API is built on and out from FileMaker as a product. It's very FileMaker in the way it approaches things. OData wasn't invented by Claris. It was implemented by Claris, but not invented by them. And to become proficient, you need to learn all of the components of seeing it as a language. There are rules, there is grammar, there is vocabulary, and you do need to learn them all to be proficient. But as I said, it's absolutely not new anymore, even for us. It's been around in the platform since 2021, initially released on Linux, and since 19.5.1, I think was the first point at which it came out on both Windows and Mac. So then everybody's had it since then. So it's like a 4-year-old technology. And to be fair, I'm happy because it's given me 4 years of conference speeches in an area where nobody else is talking. So I'm happy. To use OData, or to use OData within the server, you turn it on in the admin console. It's seen as a connector. There's a little tick box that you turn on in the same way that you might turn on WebDirect. And then in your files, you go into the managed security, and it's another tick box to use in your privilege setups. Tick boxes for FMRest. Once those two things are on, then you can use FileMaker, you can use OData from your FileMaker file as well. But if it's on the server, anybody else who has, what do they need? Just a URL and some credentials can use OData. You, as the owner of that FileMaker file that you want to give people access to, are completely in control of the access. So everything that you expect how it would work if you modify the privilege set is true of OData. You can give people access to very specific pieces of your data. It's true that OData can do things that modify the schema, and to do that you need a full access account. That does mean you're not going to give out that username and password frequently, if at all. And like many other things, it needs to be, when you're passing it across, it needs to be base64 encoded. So you base64 encode the username, colon, the password, and when you're passing things in a header for your authentication, it's basic authentication with this particular piece of data. And at the bottom of the screen is the basic structure that we'll refer to quite a bit about how you, I said, all you need is a URL. What does a URL look like? HTTPS, your server, /FMI, /OData, /v4, and then the file. And I will correct that typo before I do anything else. But that's what you need to know. So it has a similarity to FMI WebD or FMI Data v latest. FMI OData v4 comes after the server and before the file. Okay, so that's what you need to just have as a bit of muscle memory. That's what I need for the URL. The next thing to really get hold of is that it works on anything that's on your relationship graph. It works on table occurrences, not layouts. The data API works with a layout. You give it a layout name and it works out what's on there. This is not talking to, you could have a file that has no layouts, just lots of table occurrences. It could just be a data store and OData would work. It doesn't need layouts to do anything. It does need something on the graph, a table occurrence with a name, and that's what it works with. It does know if in your relationship graph you've joined two of those table occurrences together. So there's a line between them. But unlike when we're presenting data in FileMaker, it's not using that relationship in the way that you build it up. We can build relationships that are multi-predicate, that are sorted and filtered. OData isn't using that. It just knows that you do have some kind of join between table A and table B, which in itself gives FileMaker developers a number of things that make them go, why is that happening like that? And
we
what
have
OData,
a question. We have a question from Barbara.
I'm going to stop in a couple of slides time for questions. So if you want to keep that for a second, I'm deliberately keeping some pauses in the middle so we can stop for questions, if that's all right. Or do you want to ask it now, Barbara?
I don't want to interrupt you, John. It's just you were talking about table occurrences and how it reads all table occurrences instead of base tables. So I was wondering, in best practice, to have an API file that just has a representation once of each table, so for performance reasons?
Potentially, the answer to that is yes, but it can't read table occurrences that come from another file. So we can put external data references and put a table occurrence from that file in the file, but it is just a table occurrence of something from outside. So it has to be table occurrences of tables that are in this file. So if you think about the data separation model, where you really do have, it's a file just full of all the tables and all the data, OData will work really well with that. Less so with your interface file in that respect. In the same way that if you optimize how you create a MySQL database, it will perform really well. If you are considering providing data using a FileMaker file as a data source to wherever it's going, then optimizing it by skinning it down will help with performance, is the truth. And so you don't need Anchor Buoy. You don't need 8 million table occurrences. You just need the tables because you can make joins between them on the fly. But that's a great question.
Thanks. That was my mental model. Yeah, cool.
Okay. So, and what we're going to do it's a method of querying a set of data. Is we're going to ask questions of it, or we're going to interact with it. We're going to say, could you give me this where that is true? Or could you update that where this is true? Or could you make this with these values? Okay, that's a simple model of what we're actually going to do. But to do it with OData, we have to learn the language, what goes into the headers, how to write those queries, what are the things you shouldn't do, what are the things you can do and could do. So I wanted to do like a proper introduction. We're not, however, doing a, let me start to tell you how to use OData, because what we're about to do now is put a foot on the gas and go very fast into some deep stuff. But just want to ask, give people an opportunity to ask any questions if they wanted to.
It's either a shy group or...
Yeah, I don't believe that, because most of you Americans... Really? Okay, that's fine.
We have introverts in the US, John. We do.
I know. I have met you before, Elizabeth.
The questions come from the details.
Well, hopefully. What I want is for everybody to leave this presentation with one thing at least, where they go, "Oh, I didn't know that." Okay, so look out for what that might be for you. So, if that's the case, let's bat on. So, if we want to start using OData, what are the best tools to use? Okay, best tool to use is your browser. The best tool to start with OData is your browser. What does a browser do? It takes a response from an HTTP request, which says, could you give me something? And it renders it. Now, usually we're rendering content that turns into what we call web pages with pictures and links and things. But it's perfectly equipped. If you go, here's some data, for it to go, okay, I'll render that then for you. And so let's demonstrate to you what we're talking about. So, learning things. So we've started with our URL. We've got the first bit, HTTP, our server /FMI. We get to OData v4. If we stop there, put a / and say $metadata in a browser. At that point, it will ask you to enter a username and a password. Okay, so if you have those two things, it'll let you log in. To be fair, and don't do this and don't pass it around to other people, you can also put that username and password at the first part of the URL, like we used to do with the XML gateway. But shh, don't tell anybody. And if you successfully log in, that's what you'll see on the server that I'm demonstrating that with. What I have is a list of databases. It's self-declaring, remember, really key point. It's telling me what it's got. That list is based on, I gave you a username and a password, and I told it which tables you could see, and that's the list I said you could see inside this file, okay? Those are clickable links, and you can click on them, and it will take you to what we see next. Or I can pick one of them and put it in the URL. So we're going to pick the OData test file, and then we're going to move the metadata to the end. Metadata is data about data, obviously. So that simple URL with your username and password is going to start to tell you something about the FileMaker file that you're looking at. It's going to importantly tell you something about the server. But if you start to look at that, we've got metadata for clients. So I'm looking at a clients table. This is the top of a long list. This is showing just one part. This is about 15 other things underneath here, but we're just showing the top part. And then we have a table, and we have things that to us will look like field names. And next to it, there's a type. When you're looking at that data, EDM stands for Entity Data Model. So that's just a technical thing. So we can see that some of those fields are a string or a decimal or at the bottom a time of day. That's the type of field. And there are some other columns which we'll talk about in a second. And underneath, I have this little thing that says, oh, related to this, so related to clients, I have some set of data that's called projects. And you can already envisage what that is, okay? But you, as the person who's managing this, have not ever seen my FileMaker file, and you already know something about it. What are we learning? What are we being given? We're being told what's the server that's behind it, what's the version. In the language that we need to learn, what we call tables are referred to as entity sets, and a collection of fields that are given to us are called a record set. And the right-hand column had some letters in it, and there's a key at the bottom of this whole thing that tells you what those are. An I stands for if it's indexed, an R stands for if it's read-only. So let me look at another bit of metadata from a different table. And on the right-hand side for a second, we can see a file that's got an attribute of A. That means it's auto-generated. That's a serial number field. The V, what does that stand for? That stands for a version ID. I stands for it's indexed, and at the bottom, C and R means it's a calculated field, but it's also read-only. And the reason is I know that's a field that is entering get record number. Okay. On the left-hand side near the top, the unique ID has a star next to it, and that's because OData is treating that in a different way. It knows that that's a key to your data, and that's happened because in your setup you've said that this field needs to be unique. So anything that you tick that says is unique, OData is going to go, oh, that's unique. You can be treated as a key then. I can use that information to get to you. It does imply that if you have 5 fields in your table that are all ticked that they have to be unique, the OData will in fact see them all in some way as a key. The default value column there is giving us, so clearly some of those fields are doing get current timestamp or get current user or get current username, and whether it is or not supposed to be empty. So again, without even looking at a FileMaker file, we've got some information to build up some model of what's in the data that's being presented to us. If you click into, when you're viewing this with the master data, if you click into the address bar, you will see that the browser has added format equals HTML to present whatever it's presenting as HTML. But you can change that HTML to be JSON instead. And that's what you get back. It's the pure JSON representation of what it's just shown you as HTML. And by magic, and to please Bev a great deal, you can change this to also be XML. And that's the XML representation of the same data. Obviously, it's presented slightly differently, but the XML version of the metadata that you can see on your browser, if you go to the very bottom of it, contains extra information. So it's self-declaring. If you ask me for information and you ask for it in XML format, I'm going to tell you some other things. So about the 5th line down, it says conformance level type / intermediate. What that means is on this server, latest version of server, it's using OData 4.01 and it's complying with the intermediate level of what's happening. It's not basic and it's not advanced, it's intermediate. So if you go away and read the documentation, you can go, oh, that should be supported then, and that'll be supported, and that'll, oh, but that one won't, okay? And then right down at the bottom, recently introduced this year has been some extra things. They're called annotations. And we have two annotations, aggregate, and group by. So one of the things we have to do is learn. We can learn from this what is and is not supported on different versions of a FileMaker server. Okay, self-declared. And we're going to use some of that information a little bit later on. Now, something else that even if you've played with that I guarantee that most of you have never done is then add this to the end of the URL instead of the metadata endpoint. So we've got all of the string and a file / FileMaker _ tables. And OData is in fact case sensitive in a lot of places, but this is one place where it's not. I could have written that with a lowercase f and a lowercase t, and this would still work. If you say, can I have the FileMaker tables? There it is. There are the FileMaker tables with some extra data, some extra columns. Table ID, what the modification count is. And for those who are smart, you'll also work out that you could do the same thing with FileMaker fields. Okay. So again, I have not opened FileMaker to know things about the data set that is at the end of this URL. At the moment, all I've done is open a browser and read what it's told me about what is there. Okay. So here we've got some information in the FileMaker fields about what table something sits in, what's its name, what type it is, field ID, whether it's normal or calculated, and it would also contain some other things. How many repetitions? So there's clearly a repeat. You know, I have crossed the line. I work on the dark side. I do use repeating fields, and what the modification count of that field is. Okay. So for the purpose of doing this exercise, I went into the file that I was doing that with, went into the privilege set, and I turned off access to the client's table. Okay, so here I can see that clients is a table, and here I can see some fields that are in the client's table. I then did those queries again, did the screenshot, and they're not there anymore. Okay, so that just reinforces to you as the owner of the data, when you're giving out the username and password to someone, you're in control of what that someone can see, and therefore what they can do with the data. Okay, everybody happy with that so far? Yes, John, we are. It's fantastic. Thank you.
I have one question.
Go on, fire away.
When you're doing the URLs for the tables and the fields, that's all the tables and all the fields on the server. You don't get to specify FileMaker fields for a particular table or a particular file.
That's why it's got file in the URL. So I've gone server / FMI / OData v4, and this file, this is the FileMaker fields in that file. This is the FileMaker tables in that file. Or technically, it's the FileMaker tables and fields that I've let you see because I've given your username and password privilege to see it. Okay? So you can turn off access to a whole table, not let me have any access to even view it, and it won't be in this list. So, but that is in one file. That's the list of tables and fields in that file, and which table the fields sit on. Okay.
Great.
So we can build a mental model of what this might look like without actually even seeing the data, just from what it's told me the data is. So I absolutely think that the best tool to start doing things in OData with is a browser. For all basic queries, there's a couple of things where we might want to use something else because we need to modify the behavior with headers. We point it to a URL, which looks like this. In the browser, you might need to sign in. And the first thing to do is just do / $metadata on the end, and you'll get a response. And what we love when we have a new technology is, can I get a response from day one? The first thing I do, will it get a response? Change that URL format to be JSON or XML. Just look at what it's telling you. So we can then add onto the end of, we've got to a file / clients. We can say, right, I want to find some data, find a record, and for you to give me something back. So I am not going to teach you how to do OData. If you really want to do that, go into a browser and search for FileMaker OData, John Renfrew, and there's about 12 hours of videos on the internet of all the things I've ever done, including 5 hours for Richard Carlton, for your basic journey and how to learn OData. That's not what we're doing. But this is part of the language. To do a query, it's called a filter. So in the URL string, I've gone to this file. Everything after the question mark is the URL parameters I'm going to use. I'm going to filter something. I'm going to say, filter the records where the ID number is equal to, we don't use the equal sign, we use EQ in letters, is equal to 31, and $select is data long. What that says is, find a record with the ID number is 31 and give me back a field called data long. I can't remember why I called it that. It was for a demo. And that is a screenshot of what you will get back in the browser. So that is your first OData query. You haven't touched FileMaker. You've learned everything you need to learn, that there is a table called this, there is a field called this that you can query. You don't know if a record with 31 exists, by the way. But if you did, if you just said / clients select data long, it will give you a list of all of the records that are there, and you can work out what the ID number might be. And obviously, you're not going to do that where you've got a million records, by the way. This is like a for purpose example. So that's a screenshot of what I would get back in the browser. So here's another question for you. What happens if my other developer goes into the database and decides that data long is a completely stupid name for that field and changes it? What's going to happen to that query that I'm currently looking at in my browser? You're with me? It's going to break. And so does anything where we've sent some JSON where we're saying, hey, can we get data long? Doesn't exist anymore. It's just not there. So one of the issues here is we're writing a static hard-coded query. And if anybody changes anything in the back end, it's going to break. Now, that is also kind of true about the data API. If somebody goes into the layout that you're using and removes all the field, all your data API queries will break. Okay. Obviously, don't do that. And preferably, don't go around renaming things. But sometimes there are reasons why there are reasons to do that. If I change that query at the top to look like this query at the bottom, don't worry about what it means for the moment. If I change that query at the top to that query at the bottom, I would get exactly the same screenshot. Those two things are equivalent. They are identical, and they'll get the same response. So, what do they stand for? I'm using something called an FMTID and an FMFID. They are immutable, i.e. unchangeable references to tables and fields. So if you're using a reference which doesn't ever change, you could then change your FileMaker table names and field names if you really, really wanted to, or somebody else decided they wanted to, and that query at the bottom would produce that same result. It wouldn't break. So these things can be used in our queries, they're absolutely not readable in a human way. And they may or may not take up more characters in your URL. And there is a kind of theoretical limit to how long those URLs can be. But some of you have naming strategies which have field names which are way longer than that. So it's actually going to save you space. The other advantage with this right now is that your queries are logged in the OData log on the server when it's on. And if somebody can get access to that log, they can glean information from that. This obscures it very slightly. But the big thing here is that survives field renaming in your queries. So when you do an OData query and you're looking at it as the JSON, not just the HTML version, you get back something which is an array of objects in a value key. So you'll get something that looks like that in the data, and then you can pick that out and say, oh, that's what I need and want. But what if both of those parts, not just the query, but the answer that you're given back, could be abstracted in the same kind of way? So, advanced OData teaching, there are two headers to learn. The first one is in the accept header, where you say, hey, could you give me back this data in JSON format? If you don't do that, it will probably give you that back by default, although that's not strictly true. It will actually give you back XML by default if you don't tell it what you want back. But if you add to that, semicolon, odata.metadata equals, and there are three options here, none, minimal, or full. Full is by default, so if you don't include it, we'll get back full. And the second header is a prefer header, which contains FMOData.EntityIDs. The first header is a standard OData header, and anything that supports it. So earlier on, I showed you the XML, and at the bottom is what's supported, and it does say that that is supported by Claris FileMaker servers. This prefer header, because it's got FMOData, this is like a special FileMaker affordance. But what do they do? So the top query, the top response, so this is in Postman, the top response, you can see that the answer has come back with FMFID and a number and the data. It hasn't come back with data long as the key name, it's come back with an FMFID. The part at the top is like the extra stuff you get back, unless you use the other header, which says, tell you what, I don't want any of the metadata either. If you turned on both of those headers, then the bottom right is what you'll get back as the answer. In fact, that's all you'll get back as the answer to the query that I wrote. Could you give me back this, where this other thing is 31? And that's the answer you're going to get. Okay. So it's a new thing. But you're sitting there going, well, how can I use it? How do I convert from one to the other? How can I work out what that FMFID and a number stands for, or an FMTID? And how do you convert from the field name or the table name to the relevant thing? Honestly, that's a really good question. So I thought I'd answer it for you. But we already have part of the information, and we've had it for years, that I showed you in the first queries. We have the table IDs function, calculation function. We have the table names function. We have field IDs and field names. One of them gives you back a list of numbers, and the other gives you back a list of words. But the first thing in both columns is the same thing. It's just the number or the word. If you don't already have it in your browser shortcuts, the most excellent article from Andrew Duncan at DataBuzz that came out several years ago was about querying the tables that FileMaker holds about those tables and field names internally. And you can now do that with Execute SQL to be able to say what's in there. Okay, absolutely brilliant article. I refer to it at least once a month because I just can't remember it all. But you can do an Execute SQL to say, give me everything from this table that's called FileMaker tables. Or give me everything from the FileMaker fields, potentially where the table name is this. And the information that we saw earlier, just as OData metadata, is the same data. Okay, so we can get back a table ID and a field ID, and they are both numbers. So time to put your thinking heads on, because we're going to do a tiny bit of mathematics, which obviously is maths and not how you refer to it, but it's some adding up and some multiplying. Okay, so it's not advanced calculus, adding up and multiplying. Left shift involves, so left shifting a number involves multiplying that number by 2 to the power of something. Okay. The largest 32-bit number is 4 and a bit billion. So you can go and put that into a calculator. 2 to the power of 32 gives you that number. Okay. If you're holding some data in a 64-bit number, there's room for 2 32-bit numbers inside it. One's the left part and one's the right part. So if you shift the field ID to the left by multiplying it by that very large number, and then add to it the table ID number, which is a much smaller number, you're going to get a unique number. So for example, 1, the first field, times 4,294, blah, 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 added to the number that says that it's the table ID number, in this case 1065090, add those two together and you get a number. And if you put FMFID colon in front of it, that is the FMFID for the first field in that table. Okay. So it also means that with that last line, we can go backwards. If I know what the table ID is, I can take that off the number and then divide the number that I'm left with by 2 to the power of 32. And I can get back to what the original field ID number was. So we have been able forever to get the table ID using table IDs or using the execute SQL query that Andrew talked to us about. And we can do some maths, and we can get the field ID, which does start at 1. And we also know how to reverse the process that says, here's a list of things, here's 2 lists of things. The first is a list of numbers, the second is a list of names. Where does this number appear in the first list? It's in the same position in the second list. Okay. So with that information, you could spend as much time as you really wanted going away and working out how to transpose from one to the other and back. However, nobody has the time to do that calculation or to copy and paste it a million times between where you need it. And it's absolutely perfect territory for some custom functions. And the custom functions to do what I've just described were in fact launched only a few weeks ago to coincide with Engage U in Antwerp. And that's where to find them. github.com/RW2359, that's me, CF4ID. And it contains 3 custom functions to start with the fully qualified field name and turn it into a field ID, or turn it into a table ID, or to go backwards. So if you go to that URL, that's what you're going to see. Some custom functions, a helper custom functions, and a FileMaker file in which it's all working for you to play around with and see what happens. What does that do though? That enables me to turn my previous static query into a dynamic query. So those of us who use execute SQL a lot often break out the SQL with a function so that if a field gets renamed, the SQL query doesn't get broken, because that's unhelpful if we're not using the code or we're not close to the development. We don't want them to break. This does exactly the same job when you're writing in FileMaker an OData query. So using the custom functions, we're going to do the filter is, oh, grab the table name from this field, and then that, where that is 1, I want to get back this, but here's the abstracted version. Now, initially, I wrapped it in quotes, and in a previous version of Server, at some point, you really did have to do that, but you don't have to do that anymore in the very latest version of FileMaker Server. The query could absolutely just like this, look like this. Find me this, where this is this, and give me back this, and give me back this. It's absolutely just like when we wrap things in execute SQL in something that prevents it from breaking. But along with those other 2 headers that I indicated before, it means that your query is just a load of FMFID and FMTIDs, but also so is the answer that you get back. And absolutely, A, it means nobody else knows what you're doing, so they can't go in and like steal your code in that sense. But it also absolutely 100% survives any kind of table and field renaming. So if you start a brand new table in a brand new file, the first table appears to always have the table ID of 1056089. And those of us with experience also know that as soon as we add a field into that table, the first field ID starts at 1 and then increments from there in units of 1. So the first table is that. The second table will be 1056090. And if I add new fields there, again, if I add a new field in that table, it will start again at 1. So absolutely, in the world, there is another field somewhere that has an identical FMFID, but it's not possible in this file that you're working with. It's in another file, and OData can't draw data from 2 separate files at the same time. So it absolutely doesn't matter. It's a kind of one-person relationship situation, okay? So that's not ever going to be an issue for you. So every combination of table ID and field ID is unique. And when we convert it to an FMFID, that is the same forever until you either delete it or delete it. It's always the same. Doesn't matter what it's called. So we've known for a very long time that we've said behind the scenes, Claris is using its own internal IDs. That's them. But now if we combine them in that way, we can convert it into an FMFID that we can use in an OData query. And I genuinely am going to pause there because that was a lot of stuff for you to take in. Anybody got any questions or queries on that?
No questions, I don't think,
have
but
a question.
go ahead.
Go on.
Go, Barbara.
The usual person. Okay, John. You're protecting us when we're creating queries in FileMaker code using OData.
Yeah.
But what if we're not in FileMaker querying FileMaker data? Are you recommending that those queries, okay, perhaps they should be calling scripts in FileMaker that return the queries results?
So
I'm saying how you're protecting a JavaScript coder from field changes.
Yes.
Which I do all the time to Eric.
Yes. So at the very beginning, so you are a web programmer and your name's Eric. And I say, I've got this file and here's the username and password to get into it. If you do this, you can discover what the table IDs are and what the field IDs are. Okay. But you also know what the field names and the table names are. So you can write a tiny bit of code yourself to do what I've done for you in FileMaker in the custom function.
Exactly what I thought you were going to say. He should do his own little cross-ref table.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And then what he is doing to write a website that's showing on the web data that you are providing in FileMaker is completely protected from anything that you do inside the file, which says, tell you what, I'll just rename that field. Because the second,
very much appreciate that. Okay, good.
the second you do it, the code will break, and nobody loves that, and nobody loves the not knowing why it breaks, because you're one step removed from the web developer and from the web and from the people who are consuming that data, going, hey, it doesn't work. So yes. But they've got skills to be able to do that maths, and they could write their own little function. Josh is around here. Josh could write a function in 5 minutes to do the same thing in JavaScript or React or something.
Right.
That kind of goes. So I say, do you want the name and address? Oh, we'll convert that to that. I'll convert the query into that. I know that if I convert the query into that, it will give me back. Now you don't need to apply the header that says give it me back in the FMFID FMTID version. The only problem is if I change the field and you get it back, the key name will also have changed, and therefore the onward use of extracting the data from the JSON will also break. So using on both sides is really helpful. And frankly, at the web end, you don't need to know what you, as the FileMaker developer, have called that field, because you're actually going to call it whatever you want on your website, aren't you? You're going to present it in whatever way you want. So does that help?
Makes sense, yes. Thank you.
Get them to write a web version of the custom functions that I have written for them.
If he hasn't already, knowing him. But,
maybe because I might have shared them with him, however.
Exactly. There you go.
Anybody else?
I was just going to ask if you can provide these slides so that when we watch the video, we have the real slides to copy and paste some of the. Okay,
yes,
thank you, dear.
Beverly, absolutely. There's nothing in this that I think I've hidden a couple of. That's why it's abstracted in the sense that I'm not showing you my server details because they're not relevant. You need to go off and start applying this yourself put your own URLs in. But yes, I will absolutely provide this deck. So let me bat on because I really do have a lot more to cover. Next thing is another really good way to view your data is using Excel. So I've just been extolling the versions of your browser. What about using Excel? What I'm about to show you has been in Office 365 since about 2021, but it's only really properly been implemented on the Mac version. And obviously lots of us who are FileMaker developers are Mac orientated, and therefore we'll have never played with this because it wasn't initially, it just wasn't there. If you select the data menu item, your toolbar on the top left will show you this button, which says Get Data, and which will take you to this screen. and you can all read. And we're all now really excited because Excel on a Mac can pull in data from an OData source. So we're going to go data, get data. We're going to put in the URL and our password. And what I'm going to see is a list of tables in that file, a list of table names in that file. Oh, sorry, that's a list of tables. OData absolutely can be a source in Excel. Log in, select a table, and then you get the data into Microsoft's Power Query. If you right-click those little drop-down items, there's a whole menu, one of which is just remove that field, so you're in control of what fields are being put here. I've added a query here where I'm only showing out of this set of records, and it's the third column where the quantity column is more than 20. So you can read what it says. I've removed a column, and we're going to say only show them that. So that's Microsoft's query language with the raw data, and that's some data. And then the minute I say close and load, we're going to go boom. There you go. It's in Excel. It takes 2 seconds for it to load into Excel. This is now live data in Excel from a FileMaker table. It's live to the extent that if I change the data, you have to do a manual refresh. But all of those instances where somebody is wandering around the building with an Excel spreadsheet on a clipboard and it's out of date does not have to be the case anymore. Okay? You can only create a sheet off one table. There's no cross joins in here, or I haven't explored far enough. I really don't think there is. That data's live. If I change that data, if I change the source data, that will update as soon as I click the update button. So let us do a demonstration. And we do love a bit of live demonstration, don't we? So there is what I just showed you in the screen grab. First thing to know is Microsoft is much more fussy about how your stuff is set up. If I select this, it's going to go, sorry, can't do that. I happen to know the reason is because I've got a really long number in the number field, and that whole thing about really long numbers aren't supported in the JSON in OData. If you get that, you need to go and fix something, okay? This, however, does work. So there you go, there's 5 records. And the next thing I'm going to do is transform the data. Wait for a second, I'm going to right click and remove that column. And I'm going to go filter the rows. And I'm going to do advanced, where the quantity is greater than 20. And click OK. So we're now back to what I just showed you in the screen grab. I've got a bunch of data from FileMaker table. I've removed some of the columns and I've filtered it down, and the button up here that says close and load, and you're going to watch live on the screen as the Excel is populated. Okay. At this point, we're not in the room, so I can't bow to your monstrous applause, but that's how simple it is. It absolutely works. So on my other laptop over here, I have the raw data, and I've just made a change to it, okay? So if I go to the Data tab again and click Refresh All, we're now going to get another column, another row has appeared because I've made something more than 20. Okay, if I go to here and I make this change, which is textual change, and I click Refresh All, wine is going to change to spirits. To all intents and purposes, this is live. Okay, you can give somebody this spreadsheet and they can come in the morning and click refresh, and that can be your live stock sheet. That can be your call sheet for the day, whatever you want it to be. It's pulling live data from FileMaker with a single click. another thing that I just did before was I'm going to add a local column here, okay, which is this equals that times that, okay? There we go, thank you very much. If I change this data over here again, so that I remove one of the columns, and I click refresh, it only refreshes that raw data, but it keeps the additional columns that I've put on. So it doesn't destroy the other stuff, it just keeps the calculation. Okay. Honestly, I think it's genius. And I have already got a million uses for it. And it's a demo that I absolutely love doing for people. The reason for considering learning OData isn't just those tricks that I've kind of showed off so far. It's because Claris are committed to it, because they're using it heavily themselves. And as a result of using it heavily themselves, they are developing it and fixing it all the time. It is, if you are aware, the underlying mechanism for communicating between Studio and Connect and FileMaker, to be able to pass data across backwards and forwards. Once the team worked out that was the best way to do it, that's one of the reasons that we've now got some of the things that are in the platform. Okay, to be fair, at the moment, the data API is used to move containers because it's a bit more efficient, but I'm going to be imagining that not that far away, that's not going to be the case anymore either, and it'll be 100% OData. So things that you see in other places begin to look like OData queries. But I have an absolute warning for everybody. For those of you who regularly use Altman's Advice Center, otherwise known as ChatGPT, it can often give you incorrect answers, not just because it's in the habit of hallucinating, but because it's reading source data from materials that are on the internet, and they don't necessarily relate to how it really works in FileMaker. So something that it says it can do is possibly not supported in FileMaker, or it doesn't work that way, or there isn't actually the syntax. You absolutely have to try every single thing that it says it can do, then come on the community and say, it doesn't work, and I'll give you an answer that says, yes, it doesn't work. That's wrong. That's not how to do it. Okay? That's your best source of advice, is using the FileMaker community. And now we've come to another really big thing. And I have to give credit to Carl from Soliant. We were both working on this and its webhooks within the FileMaker product. A webhook, as you know, is a mechanism for something to say, hey, this has changed over here, or have this data. It is the method by which Studio communicates with FileMaker when a piece of data changes on one end of that equation. When you've got those two things linked together, a webhook is used to pass that data. It's not going through anything in the middle. It's not going somewhere else. It's literally going from one end to the other. And it's in the shipping product. Rick has kind of told us in words that something new is almost certainly coming next week. So everything I'm about to show you has a health warning on it. It's in the shipping product, but anything I show you may change next week, because that's how Claris works. They're updating things all the time. It's in the shipping product and it's not documented till now. I had absolutely hoped that the new version would have been out in the last 2 weeks, and then I could have done this and gone, and here it is, and it's in the new version. But this absolutely works. What you need is a webhook endpoint to send the data to, and some way of saying when this happens or this becomes true, send that to that webhook. And the mechanism for doing that is it looks very like OData because we need a filter and a select. And we also need a table name. That's beginning to feel like building an OData query. There's an additional flag for if we want to do something when the schema changes. And if you do that, you need a full access password. To create a webhook in your FileMaker file, we have the OData first part of the URL up to the file name. If you put /webhook.add and create a JSON payload that contains these keys, then what you will get back when you post it is an answer that looks like that, a webhook ID. My favorite thing to make FileMaker developers' heads explode is to tell them that they shouldn't name a field called ID. If you have a field called ID and you want to use a webhook, it absolutely 100% has to be escaped. Otherwise, the webhook won't work. Okay, it just won't work. What you do, I'm going to show you an example in a moment. You say, when this happens, send this data. If you want to do a thing that says, when anything changes on this record, then the best way to do that is make your filter really simple. And the filter is if the row modification ID becomes more than 0. So if anything modifies the record, then trigger off the webhook. So the payload that you need to send will look something like this. Here's a webhook. That's a webhook from Otto. Here are headers that I'm sending with it. Those don't work. We'll talk about that in a second. There's a table name. There's a file, and it's got a table called clients. I'm not interested in anything to do with schema changes. And I want the row ID and the name and the ID, a field called ID, when the field called note gets John put in it. That's what, in English language, what that means. If I post to that endpoint with that payload, I'll get back a webhook number. Okay. The webhook that is sent to me may contain a delete or a patch command, depending on what's happening. So you need an endpoint that can receive webhooks that can process delete or patch commands. I started by using Pipedream, which is quite amazing, but those very nice boys and girls at Proofgeist added the feature in the last couple of weeks to auto input endpoint webhooks that can also receive them. Well done to them. Thank you very much. So,
John, I'm going to pause here for a moment because we've got about 2 minutes left. And I know you probably do still have some materials. So I want to start by thanking all of the presenters today and all of the participants who showed up to play with our FileMaker favorite thing survey, as well as the OData survey. I'm going to go ahead and leave the meeting open because this is very rich material, but typically we end at 1 o'clock, which is in about a minute and a half. So those of you that have to go, thank you very much. Have a happy holiday, and we will be having our next meeting on January 9th. Carry on, John.
For those, I'm not far from the end. For those who want to stay, I'm going to demonstrate this working live. But trust me, this does work. And we're going to hope that when a new version of Server comes out very, very soon, as Rick says, you're going to get to see some documentation as well. I'm just giving you a heads up. So we get back a webhook ID. Instead of webhook add, we can get that particular webhook back. We can delete that webhook. We can invoke that webhook, which is like a test mechanism for it. So that ID number becomes really important. I'm going to show you it working in Postman, but that other very nice person that works for Proofgeist has added into the very latest version of Otto this. If you select the FileMaker, the server tab in the left-hand side, there's now a fourth tab in there for triggers. It will give you a mechanism to write your trigger and add it to the file. It sits on the file, okay? If you've got the latest version of Otto FMS, go and play with it. If you haven't got Otto FMS, why? What are you doing? So let's demo for anybody who wants to stay. So let's have a FileMaker. I need Postman open. Let me just show you the commands. So if I send to webhook add this JSON block, it's generated, in this case, it's generated a webhook with an ID of 3. If I do a get I'm going to do get brackets 3 and send that. That gives me the information about that third webhook, okay? It's going in that file, in that table. If I make the field note to be John, it's going to trigger something, okay? If I do get all, which I'll quickly show you the response, there are in fact 3 webhooks in this file, okay? That gives you the data about it. Here is a webhook that I set up that has the field name ID not escaped. And this number has been trying for hours to work, and it doesn't because ID is not escaped, okay? Until I kill it, that's going to keep on trying forever, okay? That's why you shouldn't do it. If I delete something that's a webhook ID, that'll delete it. And if I invoke it, it says, oh, fire it off as if row 1 and 2 have worked, okay? That's the webhook side of it working. In FileMaker, I have created a webhook that says in this file, if I change, let me just check for 1 second, get all, in the clients, if I change the note field to be John, okay? So in this note field, in this record, I'm going to type John. Over here, we've currently got 77 records. If I click out to commit it, I do have to wait for a few seconds for the action to be triggered, for it to pass across the internet and to end up somewhere. But there are now 79 records, okay? So I've done something in this file on the right-hand side by modifying a field, so that could be changing a status field, and I asked it to send a payload to a webhook, and the 2 records it's created are is this one. This is the one that's the one I really care about. It's given me row ID is 1, it's record number 1, and the name is MacArthur, and that's the ID field. I'm also asking Otto to give me the headers as well. Okay. So I made a field change here. It fired a webhook, and the webhook ended up somewhere where all webhooks go to die in a file. Okay. I am going to remove that now, and in a second we'll get another response, because I need to show you that, because I need to talk about it for 2 seconds. There we go. Another 2 records have happened. In this case, a patch has happened in that file, but the issue is I don't know what the record number is. I just know that something happened. So here are the issues with the webhooks right now, today. At the moment, they are not saved. They're saved on the file while the file is open. If you reboot the server, the webhooks all go away. For now, brackets. Read into that what you like. There are issues with passing headers, that some of them don't work. It may be that I've reported that quite a lot, several times. Hopefully, some of those things may get fixed quite soon. If in your URL, you, instead of just having the file name, you have the file name .fmp12, it generates a different webhook. Uncle Clay of this parish says, don't do that. Just don't put the FMP12 in the URL. I'm passing that on to you. So I've just done, when I deleted the name John from that field, it has sent a webhook and it said something changed, but it hasn't told me which record changed. That may or may not be quite as useful as you really, really think. And I do know several other things that I'm expecting to change in the next release. And I am going to stop there. I've loads more that I could talk about because, as you know, I know lots about this stuff. But I'll happily stop and chat with anybody now. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and all gathered people. So let me do a stop sharing.
Thank you, John.
There we go.
Thank you. I think my brain is full.
Scream if you want to go faster. I absolutely can go faster if you want.
Well, I'm sure everybody's eyes lit up when they saw the data source in Excel section. Does this mean it's worth the work and the overhead to not have to write spreadsheet or crosstab reports in FileMaker?
Yeah.
Absolutely, potentially. So my advice is create a shadow table which has just the fields you want to give access to somebody for. So you've got a table with 800 fields in it. Create a shadow table with the 10 fields that you want, with a one-to-one link between the records, and copy the data across, and then give somebody access to that table. So you're only working on a narrow table, not everything, with the fields that you want them to have access to, with the records you want them to have access to. That would be, now there's no science around that, but that's my recommendation. Don't try and hit old school tables that have hundreds of fields in them with OData, because it'll slow you down to a grinding halt. And then you'll think OData is not very good, but that's not the truth.
Dan, so since you mentioned that, one of the big I'm going to call it a suck feature in FileMaker is that summary fields can just be ghastly, right?
Yep.
You have that same issue with your OData. Like if you were going to put a summary field in that narrow table, are you going to have those same sort of performance suck issues?
You're going to go, don't put summary fields in those tables.
Got it.
Grab the raw data and do the summarizing in your JavaScript, because it's much faster and it's not providing the constant load of FileMaker having to reference all the other tables and fields to create the summary, for example. What you're doing is think like a SQL developer that says, here's a table of raw data. It's a set of rows with a set of fields, and each of the fields have got data in them. I'm not giving you all the fancy affordances around the edge. It's a mechanism for web development of getting access to raw data. You go off and do whatever you like with it.
Eric has a question.
Oh, okay.
Eric, do you want to voice your question you posted in chat?
Oh, sure. If I had a choice of data transfer methods like ODBC, OData, export, import, what would be the fastest for like bulk transfers, you think?
Right. Okay. I am going to go back and share my screen for 2 seconds, and I will also copy the link into the chat. There is a post on the forum from Jesse Barnum, and I spoke to Jesse just recently about it. So Jesse came to one of my sessions and learned about OData. He has tested, because he wants to think about using it for mirror sync. How does OData perform? And we've all understood that importing records from CSV is one of the fastest ways to do it. Jesse did some testing on what happens if you create a batch in OData to put multiple records in at the same time. The fastest that he has got with OData is twice the fastest speed you can get with JDBC, direct entry. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to copy and paste that link into the chat so you can go and read the thread, because it's very, very interesting. In the right circumstances, OData is not slow and is performant. but Jesse has done a lot of testing, and we don't all have his opportunity to, do that stuff. So I am learning from him as well. But it's a very interesting post where it's quite long, but he genuinely talks about what he discovered. So let me just post that in there. There you go. There's the thread.
Cool.
Yeah. One thing I'd heard, I think with talks with David Simpson, and I think maybe he was talking to Clay Maples, that they were actually going to be if they haven't already, basing ODBC on OData. So it was actually going to be,
So Clay announced at Engage in Austin 18 months ago that in the end, OData will become a primary candidate for the inbound queries into FileMaker server. So it will be the OData channel, and if you use ODBC, it will convert your ODBC query into an OData query. And what that means is that OData will have a better experience. It'll be more optimized, and that is the route of travel. And it's because of all the heavy use they're making of OData in the platform. And there is a potential in the future that just as we have a WebDirect slave machine, we might end up with an OData slave machine for data-heavy queries, for example. That's not an announcement, by the way. That's just a possibility. But that's where their thinking is at. So absolutely, that's a reason to be learning OData and working out what you can do with it and why it's good and stuff.
You're saying it's translating the query or the code or something, but is it also translating the data, or is the data in a different format?
So it's working at quite a low level to talk theoretically directly to the Draco engine to get access to the raw data. It is using their OData rules about how it transfers the data. So that thing I showed you that is broken is because I've got a really long number in there in a number field. FileMaker lets you do it. OData won't let you do it because it's using JSON to do the transport. So our data has to abide by OData rules, which can, for FileMaker developers, seem really restrictive. But the reality is it can be liberating if you know what the rules really mean.
I have another question.
Yes.
You said early on that you can only query one table at a time.
No,
if you need
no,
to
one
join
file at a time.
one file at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can see things where you might have to pull from multiple tables. Can you do parallel queries and then combine them somehow in FileMaker? Are you using JSON or JavaScript, or what are you doing?
So there's a thing in OData called a cross join. So if you write an execute SQL statement that says, I want this from this table where this is joined to this. So it's a SQL join. We know how to write those. In OData language, it's called a cross join, and you set it up in a similar kind of way. So I know that I have projects off that client's table. So I could say, can I have some data from the projects table where I've given you the client ID by creating the cross join on the fly? It's exactly the same principle.
Okay, cool.
So yes, it's not for the faint-hearted, and it takes a little bit of troubleshooting. Absolutely, it works though. But you also have to be aware of general performance issues. Again, don't cross-join two 800 field tables. That will give you a lot of grief.
Okay.
But yeah, it's called cross-join. My purpose today was not. I could do a whole hour on just how to build cross-joins. That's not the purpose of today. Today was shock and awe, I think.
Knowing what's possible is key.
Are there any other questions from the group?
I wanted to ask John, what are his immediate imagination for these webhook triggers?
Oh,
besides an audit log, which seems like the obvious thing.
The absolute worst case is to think that you can use this to build a full sync.
I will never do sync again if I can help it.
in a multi-user environment where lots of people are changing lots of records, one of your servers are going to get killed if you try and use it to sync. But absolutely, audit logs. If there are key fields that if something changes, you want to record that in an audit log, ideal for that. Because it's asynchronous. It happens the second the data is committed, no scripts are running, doesn't interrupt anybody's workflow, just happens. Webhook gets fired. Eventually it gets there 2 or 3 seconds later. So any other form of something like that, error logging would be the same. Set a field with the data that's the error and say, if that field changes from empty to full, then send that off. So build a JSON object with your error, send that off in a webhook. That's one of the those are the obvious big things to do. No notifications. When the status changes to approved, send an email to somebody to say who approved it, because you also have the data about which of your staff members changed the field. Okay. Again, it's not a script. It's asynchronous. The second that the data changes, you can capture some stuff. You've captured the modification name. You captured the timestamp. You captured this about the record. You capture whatever you want. You're in control of the payload that's sent. But there's, those are a couple of quick examples. On the end of the webhook, as you know, you can put anything. So using auto.
No, I mean it's like the simple queue paradigm.
Yeah.
Whatever once coming in, you can run that payload off to a notifications engine.
Do whatever you want with it.
So it is intriguing. It's an intriguing new thing.
Yes.
Where are they stored? In some secret place?
Okay, not many people on the call. At the moment, they're not saved. In the version that's coming out next week, I can tell you where they are going to be saved.
Okay.
After that.
So it's not going to be a server restart, they're gone, because obviously then
it's going to be accessible on the server as a stored thing, and therefore they can be restored as soon as the server is restored.
Server directory for that file.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's currently not, and so if your server dies, all the webhooks go away. That's not ideal.
Yeah.
But I'm not. There's no point shouting about that because I know it's going to get fixed quite soon.
I'll wait till things come out. I'm just starting to think it.
Oh, okay.
Gather all your thoughts of it. How do you use it?
I've used it at the moment. I can't use it in a production way because I know we're not at a version that's stable enough. I have been using it testing it and to demo. I haven't done many demos because it's brand new. But we've been doing it to try and work out what the edge cases are. Carl and I have been hitting it and going, oh, that doesn't quite work. Oh, that doesn't work. It'd be great if that worked. And then putting in ETS bugs saying, could you fix this, please? Having some conversations with Clay. So, but obviously that's giving me, it means I'm the first person in the community who's talked about it, and therefore I become the go-to person on another thing. So isn't that why we do it? Yeah, there you go.
Cool.
All right. Any other questions from anyone?
This has been very, very valuable. I really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Lynn. I mean, I do appreciate it's been dense, as in there's a lot of material there.
Yeah.
But that's because for people who haven't even started it yet, you have to understand that there are some advanced things going on here. There is a lot of potential for things for you to learn. There's a lot of things you can do with it. It isn't just one little feature. I think it's an increasingly important feature in our ecosphere is how to manage OData. So there you go.
Oh, good.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Well, I think that's it. We got our last 11 hangers on.
Your first hosted one, Elizabeth? Your first?
This is my first hosted as a board member.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Barbara.
It was good. Oh, I try not to miss it when I can.
So Lynn's in California, right?
Yes.
And where are you from, Elizabeth?
I'm in Boulder Creek, California.
Oh, you're also in California. That's right.
Yeah. I was actually very close to where you guys held the first full access conference, but I
Oh.
already had unrevocable plans for that weekend.
Oh.
I was like, oh, can I go to one day? Oh, no, I can't.
Yeah.
Because it's literally right around the corner from me.
Yeah, the schedule actually kind of almost did that to me too, just now. This coming year. It's kind of a busy time of year for work, but I got them to let me go. Hopefully I won't be called to too many things while I'm there though. So.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I think I'm going to close the meeting and wish you all happy holidays and
Thank you.
safe, lovely holidays with your families.
You too.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Elizabeth.
John.
Happy holidays.
Thank you, Roman.